right, folks, come on in and have a seat. We're going to get started, and then we got more folks coming on in. I know we've got a lot of folks that are online today, so welcome to you. Glad you are joining us online. I want to go ahead and say that I don't know exactly how Mark's going to do this, but in this, we will be taking questions. And for those of you online, if you want to write your question in the chat, Lynn will be up here giving those to Mark along the way. So glad that you're here this morning. I know today will be a very helpful, encouraging day, I believe, for all of us. And again, thank you to some of you in here who you're not exactly in the parenting phase right now, but you are leaders maybe who are helping others and their families, or one of these days you're going to be grandparents. And there is a lot to glean from what you're going to hear today. So I get the privilege of introducing Mark Gregston. You're going to find out very quickly, Mark's just a unique individual that I love him already, and we haven't spent that much time together, but it's been really fun. Mark started kind of in this kind of ministry about 45 years ago. Just felt the need to help troubled teens especially. Did that for a few years and then moved to Texas, and over 30 years ago, he and his wife, Jan, started Heartlight Ministries. It's sort of a ranch, I would call it, about 200 acres, I think you said, where when kids just meet a point of crisis and there just doesn't seem to be a lot of hope, they can go there for about 9 months or 8 months, or you'll tell us all that. But they've serviced over 3,000 kids over the years and have really helped families try to get back to a point where they can do well as a family. And they've had a lot of success over the years in doing that. Mark's written over or right at 20 books. I think he's going to show us his newest book that's about to come out. So we'll get to hear a little bit about that. The best way to describe, I think, the camp or the ranch is, for us, would be think swamp camp, family camp, and some therapy and family, and put all that together. It's kind of a unique place to really get down to things. And the thing that I love so much in listening to Mark talk is that it's very relational. It's built on relationship, and it's very family-oriented, and they insist that the parents are involved in this. This is not just, let's drop them off and you help my kid out. And that's the way, obviously, we've tried to build our family ministry, is that it is family, and hopefully there'll be some tools and some things and some very practical things that will help us. And certainly there are times we all feel and get to a point where we're not sure there is hope. And that's really what their ministry has been about. We're excited to have them do that. Mark also hosts a national radio program called Parenting Today's Teens. They get seen on listened to on over 1,500 radio stations. We have a number of our folks who are regular listeners. As we announced a few weeks ago that Mark was coming, they're like, oh, I listen to him all the time. So they're very excited, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. So I'll just go ahead and say, here's what I like about Mark. Mark is, you're not going to hear a lot of textbook and theory today. You're going to hear down-to-earth, practical. Over 40 years, we've been helping troubled teens, and here's some things that I think can really, really help you. But it will, in a very refreshing way. It is unfiltered. It is plain. It is witty, but he ain't afraid of saying anything. And you guys know me, and so, I may get myself in trouble here because I just love it. It's very refreshing to me, and I know that you're going to get a lot out of this. And again, those of you who are online, glad you're here. I'm sure being here in person. By the way, we're going to take a lunch break, and during that time, if you want to, Mark doesn't want to eat lunch. He just wants to hang out with you guys and come see you at a table or wherever you are and chat and listen. So that's one of the things I appreciate. He's like, just use me. I'm here to serve. And, if anybody has a spare ticket to the Duke UNC game tonight, Mark will gladly take that off your hands. We got to have a phone call here recently, and I love this. Mark said, the goal of settings like this is to keep you from having to bring your child. We don't want your child at our camp. We want to help you. And so we're looking forward to that, Mark. It's great to meet you. Great to have you here at Triangle. And come on up and get us started. You're wired. Oh, there you are. I got you.
By having coffee in here. If I had coffee in here, I'd be wired. But now, you know what? It's you would think I'm sitting here pushing books, and I'm not. But I do have a book that's coming out, and I'm not pushing it. I just where I don't benefit from the sale of books. So if you're here and you can't, I want you to buy books. But if you can't afford the books, I'm going to give them to you and just say you take them, because I want you to leave with resources by the time we get to 2:30, or is that when we finish? Something like that. Well, I'll stay as long as you guys want to answer any question you want. I don't benefit from the sale of books. I don't get paid to do this. I don't get paid to do radio. This is my volunteer time that I give and to help families. And I probably spend a couple hundred nights on the road a year now, just traveling and doing this stuff. And I just love staying in hotels. It's just a little bit different. I've got 7 million miles on American Airlines, and so I've never bought a first-class ticket, but they always upgrade me now, and which makes it nice. And so I spend my time writing, but one of the books that I just got, and it's not even out yet, but I think it kind of fits a little bit with where I want to place you guys and make you feel comfortable. But I had a dog named Stitch, and Stitch was the end of 42 years of the same lineage of dogs, a golden retriever. And so we had just mated these dogs back and forth with new ones coming in. And Stitch had become just a kind of a third child. I've got 2 kids and 4 grandkids. My grandkids are 21. Anybody here a grandparent? There you go. I mean, you know this, that grandkids are a reward for not killing your own kids. And mark my words, if you like your kids, you're going to love your grandkids. And if the only purpose of changing the way or doing something different with your own kids is so that you have better grandkids, then it's well worth it. But mark my words, you're going to love your grandkids. So anyway, So our kids leave home years and years ago, and so our dogs became our next children. And Stitch was one that we had 3 other Goldens as well as her. Had 3 of them die within 6 months, and one was cancer. One went into heat that we were going to mate and ran off, and the other was 19 years old, and which is unbelievable for a Golden. And so then there was Stitch, and so we said, Stitch, you're coming inside. She slept in between Jan and I forever at night. I always thought that I had allergies, and we found out I did. Golden Retriever dogs. And now that Stitch is gone, my nose is cleared up, and I don't feel like I'm talking through my nose. But anyway, so Stitch dies, and people started telling me all these things, and we were close to this dog. I mean, it jumped in my truck, went to work with me every day that I was home. It sat in the office with me when I was meeting with kids. It would be in meeting with kids. They would come get her and take her around and do things. And so she dies, has this grand mal seizure. She dies, and people kind of cheapened her death by telling me, well, she went to doggy heaven. Where's that? Or she crossed the Rainbow Bridge. What, is she gay now? I mean, I thought, you got to be kidding me. That something that's important as this for me, that people are giving me all these cheap shots of where my dog went. And And I thought, this is kind of typical that we feel like we always have to have the answer. I do a stint on the Hallmark show. There's a morning show, or there used to be a morning show called Home and Family. And I'd be out there every couple of months, and they noticed that I dedicated one of my books to Stitch, and they came back and said, you ought to bring Stitch with you sometime. And I said, I will. She's got to fly first class. I'm not putting her underneath. I'm not putting her at my feet. She's got to sit in a seat. She'll sit there the whole time, and that's what we'll do. So we have a production meeting for this event, and anyway, they call and they say, well, Stitch coming? And I said, she just died 2 weeks ago. I got out there, and we all sat around and started talking about, sat in off the set of the Hallmark channel in the morning, started talking about just our connection with dogs. And somebody would say, are they in heaven? I know that cats aren't, but I don't know. But I don't know. But I sat there and we cried and we talked. Anyway, one of them said, you need to write a book about a dog. So anyway, here it is. And we just got him, and it's called Where's Stitch? It's a children's book. But the intent of it, it'll be out sometime, and sometime next month, matter of fact. But I thought this, that what we do as Christians sometimes is that we always have to come up with an answer to something. And for me, that kind of showed that we got to know it all, that we've got to always have that right answer, rather than saying, I don't know. I just don't know. Where's Stitch? I really don't know. Her carcass is in our backyard, along with all of our other dogs. We can never move because I'd have to dig up the dogs and take them with me, But we get this idea we're supposed to know things. And I would submit to you this, that you're probably in a better position when you don't know something than when you think you know it all. Because when you know it all, nobody wants to spend time with you. Nobody wants to be around you. Nobody wants to engage with you. There's no joy in the journey. Well, I already know it all. I got it. And we do this thing with kids immediately as we start telling them and giving them all the answers, that there's an answer for everything. And I go, there's got to be some place. So this book is really kind of a theological book in my mind, that it's okay to not know. It's okay to talk about something and not know, trusting that God is doing something in the midst of it. And He's still in control, and He still is who He is. But there's something about the way that transforms back to all of us about how we always are coming up with answers. And my point is, you're probably in a good spot if you don't know what to do. If you are having a child that's dealing with from gender issues to wanting to smoke pot all the time and just whatever it is, just come up with any of it. You got a daughter that's sending nudes and guys that are sending dick pics to girls and all this stuff. And I wouldn't say that on a Sunday morning, but I can say it you can say it on a Saturday. It's scriptural. And then you start to think about the desperation that our kids have to want to relate to one another. And if you think you know the answer, I doubt it. I deal with kids that are struggling with all of that. I don't know the answer. I know the process of getting to a better place. And there's something about that says, and think about that for just a minute, that I really think that the way for me to impress a guy is to take nudes of myself and send it to him. Think about that for just a minute. And you kind of go, that's like me. Jan and I started dating when we were in the 9th grade. Our first date was when this Christian band came through Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Led Zeppelin. And that would be like me calling Jan and saying, hey, Jan, and here she is on her princess phone, a little dial-up thing, and hey, Jan, why don't you send me a nude Polaroid of yourself through the mail? Now think about that. How odd that would be. Somebody got it. Thank you. Think about how odd that would be. But the desperation, oh yeah, I'll do that quickly. Culture allows me to do that. The process is easy. But I really think that I can impress somebody by doing that. Or for a young man to think, I'll just take a picture and send it, and she's going to be impressed. I did that to Jan maybe about 3 weeks ago, and when I got home, she had thrown up all over the walls of the house, everything. It's just... But what they're trying to do is this. They're trying to fulfill the very thing that God's created them for, and that's relationship. And if you don't hear anything else that I talk about, I want you to hear that word, that if you have a discipline problem, you've got a relationship problem. And that relationship problem may be because of adoption somewhere. And in fact, if a third of the kids that are with us have been adopted, a third have been homeschooled, and a third are Southern Baptist. And so if you're at the Southern Baptist that's homeschooling your adopted child, there's an application for Heartlight back in the back, and we'll get it to you. But when you think about the desperation that they're longing for that, because kids don't have the relationships that you and I have had. They really don't spend time engaging like we're engaging out here, talking about stuff and showing pictures and talking about fish and snakes. And, they don't. They don't engage that way for the most part. Where you and I have learned that we can engage that way. You and I can sit and talk. Any one of us in this room, we can go sit down somewhere and talk and carry on a conversation. Our kids can't do that for the most part, because they're being raised in a world that doesn't allow for those relationships to happen. It's mostly due to this. Now, I'm not anti this. Hear that. I think every kid ought to have a cell phone by 8 or 9 years of age, and not access to the internet, but I think a cell phone so they can learn to engage and connect with one another. So don't write me off yet, and you'll hear why in just a second. But there's a part of it where they're longing to have a relationship, and they're frustrated. They're very frustrated that they're not getting out of life what they really want out of life. When Jesus says, hey, Scripture, this is an abundant life that we're talking about. This is one that's full of joy and full of hope. And they look at their life and they go, I don't think so. 15-year-old boys, it's the second highest suicide rate in the country. 15-year-old girls, it's at a 75-year high. Matter of fact, one of our girls that lived with us 7 years ago just committed suicide last week. And it's just amazing that you kind of look at the desperation of this generation. And the reason that you begin to look at it and understand it, because when you gain understanding, it changes the way that you approach them. Are you following me? Let's say that Rick walks in here on a Sunday morning, and I'm up here speaking, and he starts stuttering, and he's bouncing back and forth, and going from chair to chair. And he's just walking up here as you guys are sitting here. Most of you would sit here and go, he's not going to be here long. Somebody tried to bring coffee into the, into this place, and somebody let him have it or something, or, he's drunk. And so you get mad, you get angry, you're upset, you're ticked. You're disappointed. You feel a sense of anguish. You feel like that he's not living up to your expectations. Somebody go, he's not only drunk, he's fired. So he stumbles up here and he climbs up here and walks up and stands next to me and puts his arm around me and goes, Mark, and just throws up all over my boots. Most of you would go, we're going to get rid of him. I go, whoa, wait a minute. He's not drunk. He's having an aneurysm. Every one of you in this room would run to him in a heartbeat. It wouldn't matter that he threw up on the boots. It wouldn't matter that he's embarrassed anybody. You would now look at it differently. Matter of fact, I would be honored that he would walk to me and want something. And I think when you start to gain an understanding of what's happening with our kids, that there's motivation behind the behavior that you see, that you begin to look at their heart and you see something different. Now, the tendency is most of us want to just control their behavior. Right? People go, just tell me the rules and the consequences and what we need to do, and we'll do that. It doesn't work that way, because kids don't look at life that way anymore. They don't respect authority like they traditionally have. They feel like there's a great sense, a demand for perfection, which they're never going to achieve. If you're one of those that go around and quote Matthew 5:48 and that says, "Be ye perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect," then you probably have a lousy home life because it's not going to be perfect this side of heaven. Or if you're one that is very judgmental, then you will have an amazing way of pushing your child away. And it's not whether you think you are or not. It's whether they think you are. So do this. While you're sitting here, we'll do this. Just write your child and say, "Hey, do you think I'm judgmental?" And send it to them. You can text all the time that we're sitting here. Or, "Do you think we want you to be perfect?" They're going to be going, "What? Dad, are you drinking again?" Or "Mom, what's up?" Or you rule with authority like this. "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, and this is what it's going to look like." It'll push kids away because the culture has changed. And so my point of it is that somewhere, if the appeal is the relationship, and it's saying, how do I do that? How do I appeal to a child in such a way that they'll want to move toward me and walk the path that we desire for them? If I can do that, then I'm further ahead of where we're going right now, because the tendency is we get into fights and quarrels and all the other stuff. Are you following me so far? Okay, just so you know a little bit about my background before we dive into some of this stuff. When Jan and I dated all through high school, but when we were 19, I came back from the University of Arkansas from swimming and swimming there, and she came back from Baylor University, and what, do you swim or do you? Oh, wow, cool. Goes, yay, water. And so we came back, and somebody walked up to us. We're going to Tulsa University, and somebody walked up to us and said, "Would you like to lead a Young Life Club?" And I'm going, Young Life is an outreach to kids, yeah, we will. And this was the year before we got married, and so we started leading this Young Life Club, and so much that we moved to the same area as the school and lived in an apartment there, and that our apartment became kind of the place where kids would come by. And so it just kind of blossomed and kind of went nuts and crazy. And after the third week of meeting with kids, a man was picking up his son and said, "I'm struggling with my son. What should I do?" I have no idea. Why don't you let him come live with me? And that's how it started. And so he came and lived with us. He's now the orthopedic surgeon for the Oregon Ducks. I wouldn't let him touch me, but he's done well, and so we spent some time just working through and talking through things, because I was kind of going, I have no idea. This church approached me and said, "Would you work for us?" And I said, "Absolutely not." I get better as it goes on, so people be moving forward continually, and so. Yeah. You couldn't hear back there? Can they turn it up? Okay. Yeah, we can turn it up. Then we did this other thing, and it was really good. So it was good. Is that better? Okay. That's good. So we worked for this church. They said they would pay for me to go to school and law school, and I said I can do that. So I worked at a church for 7 years, and all during the time that I was there, I kept thinking, my heart is really for these kids that are struggling, because there was no answer. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. So we moved to a sports camp in Branson, Missouri called Kanakuk Camp, and we lived there for another 7 years where it was pretty much determined that, okay, this is what we want to do. And so then we moved to Texas 33 years ago and started working with kids, and they come live with us, and we just spend time with them and help them, and we have a full staff now of counselors, licensed professional counselors that work with them in group meetings. And so it's 65 kids, and Jan and I live right next door to the property. And so we've, as was said, we've now had over 3,000 kids live with us. Crazy. Little did I know that the work that we were doing with struggling kids would intersect with the way that culture was going. And I really never thought that I would be spending time telling regular parents, about kids. And the hardest thing that I have to convince parents of is that the kids that live with us are no different than your kids. It used to be that they were. They were the incorrigible juvenile delinquents that lived on the other side of something somewhere else that nobody wanted to spend time with. All of our kids now, they've grown up in the church. They know Scripture like the back of their hand. They are great kids, but they're struggling, and half of them would tell you they wouldn't be alive had they not come live with us. And so I say that because these kids are just like your kids. If 50% of our kids would say that they wouldn't be alive had they not worked through their issues, you begin to see the importance of us doing what's needed to help kids survive in a culture that you and I have said that we're glad that we don't have to grow up in. Have you said that? Our kids do. So is it really any wonder that perhaps anxiety and depression is on the rise? That the symptoms of mental illness that we see, just because you have symptoms of something doesn't mean that you are. And I'm not one that's against mental illness and saying, no, nobody's mentally ill. But I think you can have somebody that says they want to kill themselves. They're not necessarily mentally ill. They just live in a culture where they've lost hope. And so we have this amazing way of saying, well, no, it's just because of this. I said, no, it's not because of that. It's because culture is not giving these kids what they really desire and long for. So now they're desperate, so they do stupid stuff. I mean, stupid stuff. Our girls are so desperate for relationship. Think with me for just a minute. If I was a young lady that are all growing up a lot sooner than the young ladies when I was in 8th and 9th grade, you think? We had one girl that had grown up early, but she had flunked 4 or 5 years, and that's kind of a joke. But so they're maturing early. Guys are watching porn in 5th and 6th grade, and you go, no, 4.3 million porn sites. I didn't know there were that many naked women in the world. I really didn't, but it was everything that I prayed for when I was in the 7th grade. I thought if I could just have something that I could look at naked women all the time. If I grew up today, I would be a mess. And every one of you men in this room know exactly what I'm talking about. It's every man's battle. And so I look at it, so you got a young man that's looking at porn, and it's not just pictures. I used to look at pictures all the time on hunting trips. You just hope some uncle came and left some magazines underneath somewhere in the hunting cabin. And so you'd look at the pictures. Now it's videos, almost instructional videos. So these are the things you have to do to get there. So our guys are watching that. So our guys are saying, okay, this is what I want you to do. Girls are desperate enough. I'll be with any guy. I'll do whatever. Okay, I need you to do this. And they do. And these girls are going, you know what? I don't want to do that. I'd rather have a relationship with a girl than I would with a guy. And I don't blame them. And you begin to understand what's happening with a lot of our girls that saying, I'd rather be in a relationship with a girl than with a guy because I have the warmth of friendship. I have somebody who cares for me and longs, all those things. Do you see the problem? And we can yell and scream about everything else there, but we can miss out on the root of what's really going on. And when we begin to understand what's really going on, then that changes the way that we engage. Just like we would change knowing that it's an aneurysm and somebody's not drunk. It looks the same. Doesn't it, Doc? Yeah, it can. And you just go, so it's if it looks the same and we get this idea, well, all our kids are rebellious. Maybe they're not rebellious. Maybe they're just lost. And we've been there before, haven't we? We sing about it. I once was, but now I'm found. And when you forget that you were once lost, when you forget that, then you will become very judgmental. There's always the reminder that we too have been lost. And so it's only by the grace of God that we found our way. And so the same way, it's the way these kids are going to find their way, by an act of grace, which is one of the hardest things to do. Grace is hard. It is hard to move towards somebody that has offended you. Scripture says, like the barred gates of the citadel is one who has offended the other. That it's hard. Once it's up, it's hard to break through. But James Taylor, it said something very scriptural. Do you know who James Taylor is? Okay, good. You'll be healthier if you did. And he said this, he said that unconditional love over a period of time can warm the coldest of hearts. And it's not in any of his songs, but we were at a concert, and I go, did you just hear what he said? And I happened to be videoing with my camera when he said it, and I thought, this is amazing, that unconditional love. Well, we know where unconditional love comes from, that God would give us the opportunity to love unconditionally, because it's a different kind of love. And so that's what we've got to engage with to help our kids get to a different spot. You following me? So we're going to go through and look at a number of things. I want to make sure I'm answering your questions. I'm going to tell you about some resources that you can get, from podcasts to radio and all that other stuff. When somebody approached me and said, you need to write a book, I said, I can't do that. I don't even read books, quite honestly. I got to law school and bought the stack of books that was like this, and I said, I can't do it. I cannot do it. I find myself reading. I just read one of my books, as a matter of fact, and I thought, that's a pretty good book. I just can't remember on the next page, and then I have to go back and, okay, what did that say? And you can't do that in legal arenas, much less anything else. So somebody said, you need to write a book, and so I went back to my 5th grade skills of outlining, and I said, well, I think I can do it. So I started writing, and then another book, then another book, then another. Then it just kept going. And then somewhere along the line, somebody said, you need to be on the radio. And I've always hated anybody on the radio, except for Chuck Swindoll, who's an older fellow. He's about 140 years old, and I've always followed him. But everybody else I thought was kind of a moron. Wait a minute, is anybody here on Christian radio? I always thought, I hate these people. I just don't like them. And I even said, I don't think I want to do that. And they go, they need you. I go, they don't need me. And they go, they need you. They need the input. And so that's where we started radio, and it was picked up. And so it's on like 1,800 stations. And somebody said, let's do a podcast. And so our podcast is a little bit different. And we're kicking off another new podcast. It's called I Mustache Mark a Question. And so it's just where people can write in, because so many people are asking questions. And so but it's been amazing to me to see the response and where we've kind of gone in this stuff. When I was in my 20s, there was a book that was written called I'm Okay, You're Okay. And in my 30s, I wanted to write a book called I'm Okay, You're Not. And because I thought I was perfect. And then when I turned 40, Jan and I were going through just a difficult time, I think. She was sexually abused for years, and not by me, but by a grandfather in her younger years. And that kind of came to play in our marriage. And so we went to counseling, and because she was screwed up. And so when I turned 40, I wanted to write a book called I'm Not Okay, and Neither Are You. When I turned 50, I wanted to write a book called I'm Not Okay, and I Don't Care Anymore. And then I turned 60, and I wanted to write a book called Tasering Kids God's Way. And I thought it just had a ring to it that we could use. It was funny, I was in South Carolina at some church where the people that wrote the book, Growing Kids God's Way, were in the audience or in the group. And I wonder why everybody laughed so hard when I said that. But there is a part of it that I go, there's something about putting some oomph behind the way that we raise kids and gently loving them on the other side. When Scripture talks about who God is and that He's like a tender mother nursing a child, and at the same time He's a mighty warrior, He's both and. And sometimes I think we go far too much over to one side or far too much over to the other side. And there's a balance between the two, that I can be strong and I can be humble at the same time. And so there's a way to do that. So the authoritarian approach that we talk about, it just doesn't work that much anymore because the way that kids look at anybody that's in authority. You following me? What's the first thing that kids think about when they hear the word priest, with all due respect to the Catholic Church? What's the first thing they think of when they hear the word politician? Or maybe coach? I was up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, and coach has a different meaning up there because of what's happened in different places. Now, today is a day of honoring an amazing coach. But who's going to win today? Okay, well, I'm not going to say anything different. But I'll be happy to go with you to the game if you've got an extra ticket, so. But I think people just kids look at things differently. What do they hear when they hear the word Trump? What do they think when they hear the word Biden? It's amazing because they have access to so much information that it's just unbelievable. And so, matter of fact, it's so much information that if you are nothing but a source of information, they really don't need you anymore. Moms, you've got to quit talking so much. You've got to quit talking so much. Because this is what's happening. Our kids are being bombarded by so much information that if you become just another source of information, they will cut you off in a heartbeat. Hey Siri, how many people died in the Civil War?
According to Battlefields.org, approximately 620,000 soldiers died from combat, accident, starvation, and disease during the Civil War. This number comes from an 1,889 study of the war performed by William F. Fox and Thomas Leonard Livermore.
I don't need you if all you are is a source of information. I've got the Library of Congress right here. It's like me with Fox News. Yeah. Does anybody here work for Fox News? It drives me nuts. I sit there after about 10 minutes, I go, okay, I'm done. I can't take any more of this. So what do? I turn it off. I get on Facebook. Here I am spending time looking at people I don't even know who they are. And I'm just going through my phone and here's okay, this person has a birthday. This person has, I'm finding out that somebody's dog died or somebody's mother died or some dog had pups or somebody memorized the book of Hebrews backwards in Spanish, and some moron did 1,000 push-ups and everybody's on vacation but me. Do you notice that? It's like, look at me, I am so good. So I'm sitting there getting all confused about how good everybody else's life is and mine's not. And so I just get where I go. I just need to put it down, turn it off, and stop. Moms, if you don't stop, your kids are going to shut you down, and eliminate you from that source of what they really need is wisdom. And every man in this room knows this. Every man knows this, that any one of you women in this room possesses more wisdom than all the men in this room put together. And if you shut your child down and they cut you off, they will never hear the wisdom that you have that they so desperately need. Are you following me? Dad, you got to quit fixing everything. It's okay to be broke. It's okay to not have it all together. We're all broken in one sense, aren't we? And when you keep trying to fix everything in every conversation, my wife said this to me a couple of weeks ago. And this is after 47 years of marriage. Jan and I have been together another 6, so we've been together 53 years. Isn't that crazy that she would tolerate me that long? But there's a part of it where she goes, and she's telling me something. She goes, I'm responding to her like a good man's supposed to do. And she goes, I didn't ask you to fix it. I just wanted you to listen. there was a light out. I stayed at Aloft in Briar Hills or Briar something, and there was a lamp that was out last night in my room. So I get back to the room after we go to this Irish pub and eat at Tahali Molly's or something, whatever it is. It's great. And so we eat, and I took apart the lamp and fixed it because I'm just that way. I'm wired that way. I am wired to fix things. I'm sitting there going, see how loose that is? I will fix that. I will fix that here in a little while. And it's just, I can tell you in here where there's lights out. I can see things that other people, we're wired that way. If something's broken, I'm going to fix it. But when I do that with relationships with kids, if I'm fixing them, I'm always reminding them that they're broken. And they'll walk away from you. It's like we do that in our conversations. Like at the end of a 15-minute conversation, which is just about the maximum that most men can have, unless they're smoking a really big cigar or are stuck in a duck hunting boat somewhere or fishing with somebody, and they have that time and they're forced to go a little bit further, then it's 15 minutes, and in 15 minutes you feel like, well, I've got to give you an answer and tell you how to make everything right. It's okay to let things be undone, because the minute that you solve everything for your child, the search is over. When Scripture says you will find me when you search for me with your whole heart in Jeremiah, that there's something about the search and the journey that's more important than the answer that they find. Are you following me on that? So it may be leaving it open. There was a young lady that stole our car, that was living with us, stole our car and totaled it. She was 14 years old. So we had a lot of conversations. I even had her arrested. She spent 10 days in juvenile detention, and a little girl from Colorado. I had dinner with her and her parents, who are now in their 80s. I had dinner with her in Denver, and she's now 52 years old. She's a grandmother, and she just got Colorado Teacher of the Year. And it's just a carry on of the conversation that we started when she was 14. And so it's believing that the relationship is going to last. That here we are 37 years later having a conversation, that it's one long conversation in the same direction. Are you following me? Dads, quit trying to fix everything. Because the message that you're giving is that you're broken. There's not one young man, there's not any man in this room that loves to hear that they're wrong. Am I right? Of course I'm right. And but no man loves to hear. Wives, you know that. Tell him he's wrong. You know what the response is going to be. Come on. Because they don't want to be wrong. And so there's a part, no young man likes to be told they're wrong or broken. No young lady likes to be told, hey, you're really messed up. Because you may be affirming what they're already thinking. You follow me? And these are just things I've learned through the years. I mean, my gray hair and gray mustache, I know my mustache is outdated. I got this letter not long ago. It said, Dear Mark, please send us back our mustache, signed 1880. I mean, so I know that it's old. I know that my hairstyle went out. I don't even think it was ever in. I mean, but as I said earlier, I really don't care. What I do know, I have the same, I got to wear faded jeans today because it's a Saturday. If I was here on a Sunday, I'd wear the bluer jeans. But I've got 25 pair of the same jeans. I've got 3 brown coats. I've got 3 black coats that are identical to this. I've got like 20 different shirts. I've got 20 different pair of boots that I switch out and wear. But I'm pretty much, this is me. My daughter always says, you need to change it up a little bit. I go, no, that isn't going to happen. I'm not going to do that. And Jan says, you need to trim your mustache. That isn't going to happen either. Why don't we shave your head? Kind of thing. And so it's just not going to change. Through the years, what I've found is that the relational component has even gotten bigger with kids. When I was in my 20s, I really thought, okay, this thing's going to be over with soon. I'm not going to be able to do this youth ministry thing for a long. You'll kind of grow out of it. Then in my 30s, I realized, okay, at 40, this thing's going to be over. And I kept thinking that it's going to stop. It's going to be different. I am 67 years old, and I have more kids wanting to spend time now than ever in my life. It drives me nuts that they're always saying, can we get coffee? Not in here. Okay, if you can't drink coffee, can you eat ice cream? You can't do that either, so it's no food or anything in here. What if you sweat a lot? Are you still welcome? Okay. As long as you wipe it up. I thought that would be it. But there's a part of it, the older I've gotten, it's been amazing to me how kids really want a little bit of gray hair. They want that wisdom that they haven't been getting. When I turned 65, I was in Oregon at I'd just done a little tour of some cities around, the pot capital of the world, and it's amazing. You drive anywhere around there, and it looks like deer stands out in the middle of the fields. They're not deer stands. They're guard towers, and it's all the pot fields, all the cannabis fields that they have, and they pay kids there $15-20 an hour cash to pick bud, which is just amazing to me. So all these kids, there's been a shortage of kids working in Oregon for a long time because they're out in the fields picking bud off of all these plants. And if you smoked pot before, you know what I'm talking about. About not the $20, but about picking bud. And so, thanks. It's coffee-flavored water. Thank you. And we just finished, and I was tired, and I turned 65, and it was the day that I turned 65, and I was just worn out. I was just tired. And after 5 days of getting up, going to the next place, talking, going to the next place, and just driving all over Oregon, and beautiful place, but it was just different. And so I finally get to back to Portland, and I check in my car, and so I walk and I check in my baggage, and I'm just sitting there. And this is 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's kind of humid, and I'm doing this, and I'm just sitting at a deal thinking, maybe it is time to slow down. Maybe it's time to just stop, and maybe I'm not as good as I used to be. Maybe I'm tired. I don't even know anybody. It's my 65th birthday. I'm in the middle of potland, and I just was feeling bad and thinking, yeah, I am. My bones ache a little bit more. I'm tired. Maybe I don't have it. All of a sudden, this little 25-year-old girl walks by, and she just turns. When she gets about right there, she just turns and looks at me and goes, she just walks on. I just went, well, maybe I still got it. And then she comes back by again, and she stops right there. And then she walks on, and I thought, I think I can go another 20 years. I think I can do this. And then she came back, and she stops about right where you are. And she looks at me, and she starts to walk toward me. And I'm just sitting down, trying to hold my stomach in and stretch my neck out so they don't see this little thing that's been growing. What's that called, a wattle? What is it? A dewlap? A dewlap? What? I'm just sitting there thinking, oh, this is, she must like me. And she starts walking toward me, and she goes, sir, do you need a wheelchair? You could hear planes crashing in the background. So anyway, as I say this, what I've learned through the years is that there's a scripture that says that in Thessalonians that I was Oklahoma Bible quiz champ of 1969. That's just about my only formal training that I had. My degree's in real estate investments and finance. But there's a scripture that says, "For we were well pleased to share with you not only the gospel, but our lives as well, because you had become very dear to us." You remember how we toiled among you, how we inspired and encouraged to walk in a manner that's worthy of God, so that you may be pleasing to him. And you remember how blameless we were, which I think is a wonderful, wonderful example of how we ought to be walking, as blameless, that nobody can point a finger at us. And I think there's something about that, and that's kind of what I've learned through the years, is that the relational example that we set before our kids speaks louder than anything that we can ever say. Anything that we can ever say. So we're going to be talking about relationship. We're going to be talking about the difference between a teaching model and a training model. The teaching model is, I'm going to say this is the first 12 years of their life. This is the next 12 years of their life. And the reason it's 12 and it moves beyond the adolescent years basically is because the American Medical Association has increased the age of adolescence to age 27. The American Journal of Adolescent Psychiatry has increased it to age 26. So you're going to be doing this thing with our kids a lot longer than you thought. That's why you're still doing those things of helping them become independent and everything else far into their college years, because they're not there yet, because the culture isn't allowing them to do that. So following me with that? And as we go through this stuff, I think, what I want more than anything else is for you guys to write down some questions. There's questions, there's little cards back there in the back. There's that you can write them down and then just drop them off at the book table back there. There's things that I want to make sure by the time that we quit in 4 hours, because we've already gone an hour, it goes fast, it's going to go like this, that we make sure that we answer the questions that you have. But I want to share with you some of the things that you have said and some of the things your kids have said. And this isn't me, this is your kids. If y'all have kids here, this is what they have said. And I want to draw some correlation to them. But a lot of you would have asked questions like this. How do we bridge that gap relationally with our teens? How do we raise teens in a contrary culture with excessive freedoms, LGBTQR+, now 1, and gender dysphoria, tough guys and drama queens? Our view, understanding what kids face in middle school and preparing for high school. How many of y'all have middle school kids? This is where it all starts. It's where it all starts. Every kid that's with us, when did it start? Middle school. I call it the princess brawl, when all our girls go to school and they find out that the world isn't perfect anymore. They come home and their little tiaras that they went to school with that morning are broken, stolen, run over, crushed. They come home and rip down all their princess pillows and drapes. They hate the princess. It's like my granddaughter. I took her on a speaking deal once, and we're out at Disneyland, and she used to love going from, princess to princess, getting pictures with them and stuff. Y'all ever do that? Remember that with any of your kids? Then my granddaughter looks at me and she goes, "Papa, these aren't real princesses, are they?" And it was the change. Now the world had changed. It's not that fairy tale existence anymore. What do you do when your teen is struggling? How do you stay engaged? And how do you develop rules and consequences? We'll talk about that. And what's a grandparent's influence, which I think is great. Okay, those are questions that you guys have. Here are some things that, here's some things, I'm gonna say the middle school kids first. What your middle school kids wish that you would not do. Do and not do. You ready for this? These are your kids. Your kids were polled. When did you poll them? 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago. I just highlighted some of them because if I read all of them, everybody's so overwhelmed they start crying, Here's what one of them said: acknowledge when I'm not okay and help me instead of telling me. Try to just be there instead of telling me what to do. Give me breaks. When I make a decision, don't always ask why, just let it be, depending on the decision, of course. I wish my mom would quit responding to the world like she does. I wish my mom could be less angry and more patient. Somebody else said, don't yell. Two of them said, I wish they were less strict. And I think Christian parents are way too strict. I think it's motivated out of a longing. I think it's truly motivated out of a longing to protect our kids, because they live in a culture that's different. A guy named Kirk Cameron and I have had long discussions. He asked me to be in a movie of his a few years ago. The movie's called Connect, and it was about the impact that the internet's having on kids. And at the end of it, the movie promoted this little thing called the 360 square or ball or whatever it is. And when I saw the movie, I was in Nashville, and we were walking out. My granddaughter was with me. She's 13 at the time. She goes, you ever get one of those, and I will never talk to you again. Okay. So Kirk and I have had that discussion about, you can either raise your kids to live in a zoo or you can prepare them to survive in the jungle. Okay, I'm one of those guys. I don't believe in antibacterial soap just because I never have. And I haven't used any Doc, is this wrong for me to say that in front of people? And so I just, most people have like a 10-second rule when they drop food on the floor at home. We've got like an hour and a half, so we really don't care. I think a little bit of dirt and bacteria help you a little bit and build up an immune system. So I'm one of those guys that thinks we need to be probably a little bit more permissive earlier so we can speak into the lives of our kids while they're still listening to us. By age 13 or 14, they're not going to listen to you about a phone. So I'd rather let them have a phone early so I can help them have it become a part of their life that's normal rather than something that's abnormal. Are you following me? So it doesn't mean that we just expose our kids to the world. I'm not saying that. In due time, they will be. But you know where they're headed. So wherever they're headed, I want to prepare them for that time because that's my job, to train up a child in the way they should go. And so that means I need to let them be exposed to some things. I think kids ought to experience rejection, difficulty, and hardship in first grade. That's when it starts. And if you do it in little doses, then it's not as big. James Taylor said this also. He said, cut up your losses into doable doses. And there is something about allowing your child so much along the way so that they don't hit age 18 up here and boom, they don't know how to handle everything. And so there's a part of it that I'll let them start making decisions early. Why? Because I want them to flex that decision-making muscle so it's strong enough to pick up the heavier stuff later. Are you following me? So there's a part of when somebody says, be less strict. With that comes the other side. To him whom much is given, much is required. And so if I'm going to give more freedom, I'm going to require more back. And what I'm requiring back is a great sense of responsibility. And the byproduct of the assumption of responsibility is what? Maturity. And our kids just aren't maturing like they used to. And part of that is because the way we protect them from things. Instead of allowing them to be exposed so that I can speak truth into their life. Well, if all I am is a source of information, they're not going to listen to me. They're going to get it from here. That's like everybody in Russia right now. With all due respect, everybody in Russia, they're listening to something that's not happening. It's fake. It's not true. Ukraine is not a bunch of Nazis that are, it's just an interesting mess, but it's what people are listening to. I want to make sure they're listening to me. So I'm going to create that atmosphere for that to happen. And we'll talk about that as well. I wish my parents would consider my thoughts when teaching your ways and perspectives. This is middle school. I wish they would consider my thoughts. I wish they'd be more patient about my homework. I wish they'd stop saying, I was a kid once, because it's so much different now. I make a comment in some stuff that I say that if you ever say, use the phrase, well, back in the day, you've just alienated yourself. And people hate that. People on social media, they'll come after that and just rip up one side and down the other. Go, well, if it was back in the day, we'd all have better lives and kids would be respectful and they would this and this and this and this and this. You just aged yourself out of a connection with a child. And so when you say, when I was a kid, it'd be better to say this: I have no idea what you're going through. I am lost when it comes to some of the challenges you face. You know, I didn't know one gay kid growing up. Well, maybe one. There was another guy named Mark Morgan. Mark, are you here? He was a little light in the shorts, but we didn't know what it was called back then. You know, or little did we know. But I didn't know anybody in high school. I went to a high school of 2,500 people. I didn't know anybody that was gay. Do your kids? Well, sure they do. You know, they know a lot more now. You know, and so it's for me to say, well, back, I just eliminated it. That doesn't mean I don't address it. But I've also found that just for some of you that you know, I know what Scripture says. I believe in the authority of God's Word. I believe there's a lot of things in Scripture that I get confused about. There's a lot of things I don't know how to apply, and that's why I rely on pastors to teach me those things and show me things. And so I'm wanting to learn things. But in the homosexual thing, just where you know this, that a lot of what we go through with our kids right now has a lot to do with the culture of somebody seeking relationships, more so than it does with how they think they were born. They're just trying any way they can. One of our girls said this. I lead a group right now with kids, and there just happen to be 12 girls in it. It's kids that are getting to the end of their time at Heartlight, so they meet with me every Wednesday for lunch, and we get to sit around a table and talk. And one of the girls said, I'm pansexual. Okay, so what does that mean, sweetheart? Well, it's kind of like I'm bisexual. And one of the other kids said, well, what does that mean? Like you like both? She goes, yeah. He goes, well, really what you're doing is just trying to double your odds. And they're right. If I can like both, maybe I'll find something somewhere. And the desire for relationship is so deep inside of me that I'll have a relationship with anybody. I don't care who it is or what I have to do to get it or what I have to become. But the core of it is the relationship. Are you following me with that? And so you have to look, why don't you have relationships with people? And you go back and look at those things. Here's the thing that I learned with the homosexual thing. And I don't care whether somebody's homosexual or not. I tell kids all the time, I really don't care. Or I'm gay. Me too. And this one girl says, well, I like girls. And I go, me too. I mean, so I'm joking, but no, I do like girls. I'm not joking about that, but I'm not. But I just go, just because I say I don't care doesn't mean I don't care about them. But I'm not going to let that get in between my relationship. I can love you whether you're gay or not. I can love you whether you love Jesus or you hate Jesus. I can love you that's it's not my point. But this homosexual thing has been around for a long time. I was in Italy at Pompeii. It's a town of 15, 20 acres that was covered up with ash as Mount Vesuvius exploded and covered it with ash. And when they pulled all this stuff, all the ash, and got it out by some French guy back in the 1800s, found the city, they found that it had kind of preserved all these paintings and all these things throughout all of Pompeii. Well, there's one house there that's a house of ill repute that you can go in, and up on the walls are all these different paintings of every kind of sex act you can think of. And I'm sitting there taking pictures of all of them. And Jan's going, why are you taking pictures of that stuff? And I go, it's a reminder that this homosexual thing has been around a long time, and we're not going to solve it. Because we get this idea we're going to solve it. And so I would rather take a step and lose the battle of saying, I can accept you. and love you, but we can have a relationship because that's the only way I'm going to be able to share and influence them in any way, to give them a taste of what a relationship is like. Are you following me? And that doesn't mean that I'm so accepting that I go, oh, come on, you're here. This young lady said, the lady that was asking me said, well, you know that I'm gay. I was joking with her. And she goes, would you come to my wedding? Absolutely. Well, why would you do that? Because I love you, sweetheart. That's why. I care for you and I love you. Would you perform the wedding? Absolutely not. Why not? Because I believe that a marriage is between a man and a woman. And I go, and here's the funny thing. I can believe that, and you can believe and we can still have a relationship. And so there's a part of it where I go, I'm not going to play judge in this thing, but I just know that the power of a relationship can take somebody further than anything else because that's what they long for. Are you following me on that? I'm not being anti, but when you use this thing back in the day, or I was a kid once, I think we're not taking into consideration sometimes how kids are hearing that, is that you should be able to handle this, and they don't live in that world. Somebody else said this is middle school kids. When you're mad at your kid, see their point of view. I would ask yourself the question, why are you mad? Anger is an emotional response to not getting what you want. So what do you want? When your child says something and it doesn't fit in what you want, why are you getting mad? And why is it so important that your child's doing what you want? And it doesn't mean the challenge of that doesn't mean that you are wrong in your anger. Are you following me? Scripture also says, be angry, but don't sin. So I can still be angry because what you want for your child is something that's usually very good. It's not that you want something bad. And so it just means that you have to look at why are you getting angry in this as well. Do you see where I'm already going with some of this? Yeah. That before you look at the speck in somebody else's eye, that you've got to look at the log in yours. You got to look at yourself and say, what am I doing that may be getting in the way of a relationship? That would be a great thing to text your kids. Look at you just jumping on your phones right now. What am I doing that gets in the way of our relationship? That'd be a great thing to ask them. Somebody else says, be less of a helicopter parent and let your child show that you can be responsible. When we talk about our interest, listen to us instead of saying that you're not interested. And whenever we say we're sick and can't go to school, it isn't because we are lazy. Sometimes we're just mentally exhausted. That's a middle school kid. I mean, I didn't think they were bright enough to even, I'm surprised they can even write, Middle school kids drive me nuts, quite honestly. I love high school kids, middle school kids. I'm joking. I'm from Texas, and so I wish my parents would ask me what they could do better. There's your foot in the door right there. Text them. What can I do better? Or maybe are you afraid of those questions that they ask? Here's some high school responses. Now here's the thing. You have to understand this. Most of the time you have middle school kids, you have like 1 million kids in middle school, right? And so you're going to get answers that come from all over the place. But by the time they get to be in high school, usually juniors and seniors, the attrition rate has already happened. And so what you have left are a lot of the good kids that, not that other kids are bad. I've never met a bad kid. But the other ones have kind of fallen by the way. You'll see that when you move kids up, if you have Sunday school or classes or life groups or whatever you call them here, you have a ton of kids early on. You have fewer kids junior, senior year. The attrition rate's amazing. Friends, interests, jobs, sports, or they just go, I don't believe this. Or they made poor choices. They've just made poor choices and they're going, I'm out. Or they feel like they don't belong anymore because they feel shame. They feel the sense of guilt. They walk in the door and they go, here we go again. So they leave. And I go, that's normal. In one sense, I think there ought to be some things to go after those kids. But I go, so the answers that you're getting here from kids that have been kind of through the fire a little bit, but they're still saying some unbelievable things. I wish you would not yell at me. Expect less perfection. Not assume bad things about my friends. Less family road trips. Oh. Slowly calm yourself, Mom. Don't ask, what's wrong? Allowing room for independence, flexibility, and trust. Have more fun. Be flexible. Not guilt-tripping. Be caring. Be better at your timing. Be encouraging. Have more family fun time. And the things they're saying that parents do well are listening and understanding. They respect me and treat me like an adult. They treat me like a friend, and they help me with my mental health. And mental health is an issue that I think you have more and more kids talking about over and over and over again. Okay, so when we come back, we're going to go quickly through just a little bit of talking about understanding and the nature of some kids. Not a whole lot of time because we've done that. And then we're going to go in and talk about moving from a teaching to a training model, which I think is important. And then we'll talk about another piece that I'm going to deal with 3 circles. And those circles is this relationship circle. This circle here is developing rules and consequences and allowing structure within your home. And this is dealing with those issues. Are you following me so far? And before you know it, we'll be at 2:30 and or 2 o'clock or what. I don't care what time it is. I'll do whatever. But hopefully, what you're doing is thinking of some questions that you might have. Take them back to the book thing. Let me show you this real quick, so I can explain to you the books. And I do this where you get the right ones and don't get the wrong ones. This is a devotion for moms that I wrote. It's just to keep your heart on your child, Mom, and some encouragement with Scripture. Dads, this is also a devotion book for you. It's written in simpler language, a lot shorter, and bigger print. And it comes with a pack of 4 Crayolas that you could pick up that you can do. This is a book that I wrote for parents of middle school kids. It's just called Tough Guys and Drama Queens. And it kind of sets the basis for a relational model. Moving more into high school, where we'll talk about the training and teaching and basically listening skills and stuff. This is raising teens in a contrary culture. And this is also the one I dedicated to my dog Stitch. I love this book. It's just stories of hope and encouragement. It's called What's Happening to My Teen. And these are kids that I know that I've spent time with, that just lessons that they've taught me that I think could be helpful. The first book that I wrote that seems to continue to be one that people grab a hold of a lot is When Your Teen is Struggling. And it kind of gives a concept of maybe why a child may be struggling and some direction on what you can do. My first hardback book is a book called Grandparenting Teens, which is a great gift for any grandparent. If you don't know what to give them this, because you want them to be involved in the life of your child in some way to help you in the way that they can that's positive and not negative. Bill and Gloria Gaither, I speak at some Gaither events. Bill and Gloria have written 1 million songs, and their group is, when I go, they're as old as dirt. I mean, it's first time they asked me to speak at their event, I said, I'm just not that old. I go, you guys are old. I don't think I can do this. I mean, I thought there was going to be like clanging of oxygen tanks and wheelchairs and I'm not going to be the smell of urine throughout the whole place. I just thought this is not for me. I got to this place in Gettysburg and there's 10,000 of these guys, and it was the most fun I think I've ever had speaking somewhere. It's absolutely amazing. And so we were meeting afterwards, and they said, you need to write a book on grandparenting. And so I did, and they wrote the foreword to it. And so it's been a neat deal, but it's shown me the need for our kids to have their grandparents involved in their life and how they can do that. And the other book is it's a workbook that's called Developing Rules and Consequences. And it's just really how do you go through and develop those rules that kind of set the parameters for your family to get to a better place. And as I said, if you can't afford to buy them, then you're happy to take them. Just tell them you're going to take them. Now, don't go back there with a big box and start loading up, okay? Don't do that. But let's take like a 10-minute break, and we'll come back in just a second and start over. While we're waiting on folks to come back, I mean, for any of you cat lovers, you're dismissed. Yeah. No, you don't have to leave. I'm serious. I have a cat right here. We're giving away kittens at the end of the event. That's right. Now, we have a lot of cats at Heartlight. We skeet shoot with them. And not really. Hey, folks, if you're watching online, let me encourage you to ask questions, and you can type them in the chat, and then we'll get those and hopefully answer those. And so send those in. And thanks for sticking with us and tolerating me, the whole morning. Okay, let's move on just a little bit. Your understanding, let me give you an idea here when I talk about understanding that all behavior is goal-oriented. And if everything that I'm doing for a reason, there's got to be a motivation to it. And the tendency is that most parents say, just give me the rules about how I control behavior. Well, there's two things wrong with that. Even though you need structure, because I think kids want structure, but there's two things wrong with that. One, it's you're in control rather than building your kids to be in control. And the second part of it is that there's a tendency to think that I just need to control behavior instead of getting to the heart of the issue about what's motivating the behavior. Your kids, any of your kids play video games like crazy? Some of them do. It's mostly young men that play games like crazy. One, because they're visually stimulated. They're made that way. Women, you know the difference between that. It's guys are just visually stimulated. It's funny to me that John Eldredge made a comment. Are y'all familiar with John Eldredge? He wrote a book called, I want to say How the West Was Won. It's not Wild at Heart, How the West Was Won. Yeah, it's called Wild at Heart, and he's interesting. He says every young man has a desire, he wants an adventure to live, a beauty to rescue, and a battle to fight. And our guys find it in a video game. At the core of a young man's addiction to video games or a longing to play video games, a couple of things are happening. Usually they're interacting with somebody else if they're playing online. The older they get, the more they play online. And they're competing against other folks. But the other thing is happening this. They live in a culture, usually these kids start when they're in fifth and sixth grade, where they start getting, I wouldn't say addicted. Addicted's a pretty strong word. Dependent, or it becomes something they really enjoy because they're escaping the reality of the culture that you and I have said we're glad we don't have to grow up in. And so they're combating their anxiety, their depression, the sense of depravity, and they're moving towards something that, for the most part, they can socially engage with other people. Are you following me? So it's rooted in a good place. The problem is that you have to ask yourself the question, what are we offering our kids to get them out of that? When I sit down with kids and say, hey, let's talk for a second, or I ask them questions, and they pick up their phone and they start doing this. Does that bother you? Bothers me. But I have to get beyond it because kids now can multitask because they can carry on a number of conversations at the same time, just like you and I do. When you're watching golf, or you're watching a game, aren't you on your phone connecting with other people as well? Don't you do a number of things at the same time? And I get the idea that wait, you're not paying attention to me because you're not looking at me, what we would always say, eyeball to eyeball. Because that's what I was learned. To be a real man, you shake hands with a firm grip and you look somebody straight in the eye. Well, that's not necessarily the rules of the game anymore. And for me to think that it is, I just need to keep going and keep talking. And they pick it up and they get it. Now, that's different for me because I think you ought to, there's really a part of me that thinks you still ought to call me, yes, sir, no, sir. My wife, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. That doesn't work anymore just because the way they look at those people in authority is far different than the way that you and I looked at people in authority. Are you following me? We really thought that Lyndon Baines Johnson was a great president. Guy was a crook. He was a crooked Texan. We really thought that Richard Nixon was above reproach. I mean, it's all, we just didn't know as much as they know now. And so they look at things differently. I've always respected a police officer because I never knew growing up that police officers ever did anything wrong. Are you following me? And so it's just a different world. It's a different world. Now, in that different world, let me speak to this just because I think it's important. The Black Lives Matter thing was interesting to me when it first came out because it was really rooted mostly in South Carolina at the beginning. Everybody knows there's been more white kids killed by cops than black kids have been killed by cops. But out of the genuineness and the love of kids that so many black kids were being killed, or in kind of like the thing that just unnerves me is the thing that happened in St. Simon in Brunswick. I was as furious about that as I am about Putin. Who would name their kid Putin in the first place? No wonder he's so messed up. If my name was Putin, is anybody here related to Putin? But it just that thing in Brunswick, and it just unnerved me. And I sat there and thank you. And it just unnerved me. Because I live in kind of a racially, I don't even know what I'd call it. I was thinking of the word earlier, racially sensitive or raw area of Texas. East Texas is far different than other parts of Texas. It's extremely racially divided, and for a number of reasons, but it is. And I was raised in Louisiana. I was raised in New Orleans, where my problem wasn't hanging out with blacks any more than it was their problem hanging out with whites. Our problem was Catholics. We were told, you can hang out with anybody you want, but don't you hang out with those Catholics. I mean, because they went to another school and they wore uniforms. And all the rest of us were just kind of normal people. And so we were upset anyway. So I've never had a problem with that. And a good friend of mine a good friend of mine, this guy named Cliff Talbert, he wrote a book called Once Upon a Time When I Was Colored. And it was up for a Pulitzer Prize nominee. Amazing. He was best man in our wedding. And from Glen Allen, Mississippi. He was a cotton picker. And but it's an interesting book that talks about culture. And I hate the idea of us combining cultures. I hate it. I think there are cultures, there's something beautiful about every culture there is, and we need to embrace that. And we can ruin it, but I don't want to ruin it. I want to keep it. But I just don't want there to be the division among people, because I think that's ridiculous. Except for Catholics and cats. And I'm joking. So Black Lives Matter comes along and says, our kids matter. And because they do matter. So what was the response? All lives matter. Blue lives matter. Red lives matter. We all came out, right? That's about as sensible as me saying to my wife when she told me that she was sexually abused for 7 years, for me to look at her and go, well, hon, a lot of people were abused. Or when a young lady comes to me and says, and I've heard this way too many times, that I was raped when I was in the 8th grade. Well, sweetheart, a lot of kids are raped in the 8th grade. See what just happened? Nobody's listening. And when nobody listens, then it gets bigger and bigger. Then people, when they don't listen, then they jump and they start screaming at one another. Then when people don't listen, then it becomes where it's just one group after the other. We're all that way. But we have that tendency to not listen. And I think what happens with some of our kids is that it's not that they're being so rebellious and against us. I think they're trying to get people to listen. And you and I live in a culture that doesn't listen a whole lot. We're so intent on making sure that our message comes across that we forget that we need to be spending time listening to them. You've had your time to talk. Now it's your time to listen when they start getting into high school. Are you following me? And so you begin to hear the understanding of that. And that when you begin to understand that the drive that they have is to be in relationship, but they also have another drive that we've got to change our program just a little bit. But the greater understanding we have of what they're going through, it truly changes the way that we engage in their world. That kids are always going to be selfish. They're going to think about themselves. Well, all kids do is just look at themselves all the time. They're on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok, and all they're doing is just them, taking pictures of themselves. Just like you and I would have been if we were that age and had the access of a phone. Everybody's born selfish. You know, if I go through a day that I'm not thinking about myself for more than 5 minutes, then that's a good day for me. It's a great day for me. And so it's just understanding that they are, because we all are in one sense. And when I begin to realize that I am as well, it's things that I want and there's things that they want. When Scripture says to consider others more important than yourself, when Paul said, Timothy, I only have Timothy, he thinks of somebody else. Everybody else is thinking of themselves. That there is something about that we move to start thinking of our kids during the adolescent years. And I want to make a distinction. When they get to be 11 or 12, I start thinking about them and put them as that point of importance. That they are selfish, but we're going to break it by giving them more and more things, giving them more responsibility. That most of them feel a great sense of entitlement. You know why they do? Because you've made them feel that way. You give them everything. You give them everything. Your kid really thinks that at 16 you're going to buy them a car. They really think you're paying for college if they want to go to college. Where did that change? Well, that was even driven by the Starbucks generation that was really just kind of creating a new Cheers. Remember Cheers, the old TV program that where everybody wants to go, a place to go where everybody knows your name. And so the same way, a Starbucks became the same thing. Sitting around drinking coffee, isn't that wild? That it's now something that you get to do, and out of that longing for relationship, because I don't know about you, I came out of a pretty strict background. I can't breathe out of the left side of my nose because of the way that I was raised. It was military. I made the bed this morning at the hotel. Go to room 517 at A-Loft, and the bed is made. Because I just make bed. I always hang my clothes 2 fingers apart. I'm always, Jan goes, how come you're always polishing your boots? You don't do rattlesnake, but it's because that's how I was raised. And it was yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, blah, 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 kind of thing. And so out of that, our generation comes along and wants to have relationships. So how do you have relationship? Well, we create opportunities for that, but we give our kids everything. At some point, you've got to stop. We spend the first 6 years of their life pleasing them all the time. And then we spend the next 6 years of their life protecting them because they'd kill themselves if we didn't. You follow me? And then during the middle school years, we start providing for them. And we provide because now it matters what they wear. Isn't it funny that 2 or 3 years ago, it didn't matter what they wear? Shoes are on different feet, different colored socks, pants are on backwards, hat, they don't care. When you take a bath last? Oh, like a week ago. They don't care. Now they do. Now it changes. So we start providing for them during those middle school years. And the problem is we continue to protect, please, and provide, never moving to the next step of preparing them for the world they're going to live in. And I would submit to you that at age 12 and 13, that training starts then. Are you following me on this? That's the way you break the selfishness, is for them to realize if you continue to be selfish, it's really pursuing foolishness, the scripture would say. Just look up the word fool in Proverbs, and you'll find that every one of them is linked to a great sense of selfishness, and it all ends in ruin. Selfishness and foolishness produces pain. Wisdom produces pleasure. I want you to hear that, because we're going to talk about wisdom here in just a minute. But most feel entitled, and there's a way to break through that. They live in an appearance and performance world. They are so concerned with how they look and how they appear. That's why it's Snapchat and all these other things. But there's a lot of people who don't fit into that. That'd be like me doing TikToks, little dance routines. Why do you laugh at that? No, it's just, I have a granddaughter that is this TikTok queen that does all these things. TikTok has been an amazing thing for her, and she loves it and she enjoys it. I think there can be evil stuff in anything, but she has enjoyed it and it's been wonderful. I would not function in that. And so that means there's a lot of kids that don't function in that. There's a lot of kids that don't like sharing about all the stuff in their life. Well, there's other people, they can't wait to tell the next person what's going on in their life. Because of the lack of relationship where you get value, where you get affirmation, where you're encouraged to mature, where you find that you're worth something outside of the home, where it's validated by public, that's how they're getting it, by always putting that out there. Always showing themselves, always saying, will you just look at me? Just like parents do on Facebook. Which is saying, will somebody just look at me? Will somebody just pay attention to me? And part of it's the nature of a world that doesn't listen anymore, nor do they engage. And so the engagement becomes important, and the ability to listen, just to sit down. When you sit down with somebody, are you more concerned about talking about your stuff, or are you more concerned about hearing their stuff? And that would be the litmus test. When you sit down, how much time do you spend talking about your stuff? To my grandkids, I don't talk about me at all. I'm not there to talk about me. It really doesn't matter. If they want to ask something, then I'm happy to answer it, but I don't talk about me at all. I talk about them. I listen to them. With kids that live with us, they don't hear about me. Matter of fact, it's amazing to me that we live with 60 kids, have 40 staff that live on property. For the last 15, 20 years, I've never gotten up in front of all the kids and talked to them. It's not about me. I don't think it's effective anymore. I think it's effective one-on-one. Following me? So they live in this appearance and performance world, and you just have to know that it means a lot to them, a lot more than it meant to you and I, because we had relationships and they don't. It's their existence. The other is that they're exposed to everything. I doubt that there's any kid that's sixth grade on up that hadn't seen porn. Maybe a lot of it. That hasn't dropped the F-bomb occasionally or sends text where you read their text and they're saying things you never thought they would say. Y'all caught your kids in any of that? Yeah, I mean, it's the 32% of all your girls have sent nudes of themselves. And it just rolls off their tongue so easy. I interview kids for our radio program and podcast. And we have a YouTube channel called Heartlight Stories. A guy named Alan Carter, who's the director of The Voice, the TV program, flies in. He's coming in tomorrow night, and we're filming all day and video and recording all day Monday. But it's of kids, and it's amazing to me, in asking kids these questions, it just rolls off their tongue. How did you end up at Heartlight? Well, I was drinking a lot like crazy, having sex with everybody and sending nudes, and it kind of ruined my, whoa, let's unpack that. You're what? And we go back and start talking about it, but it's just so normal for them. They're exposed to everything. They think that's okay. Modesty, the definition of modesty has changed. I got with a group of kids, and we get this little experimental station of 60-some kids. I got 20 of the girls together, had them over to eat, and I asked them, I said, hey, let me read you a description of a woman, and you tell me what you think. The Proverbs 33 woman. Proverbs 31. Proverbs 33 would be interesting, though, wouldn't it?
You can write it.
I can write it, yeah. And in the comments that these girls made, not knowing that it was Proverbs 31, they're going, nah, I don't want that. Isn't that amazing? And you kind of go, okay, they're exposed to everything. I have this image of what I'd like for them to be. So how do I counter that? And what I can do is try to control that. Now, you shouldn't think that way because Scripture says this is a completely different. Don't ever use the F-bomb. You can't say stuff like that. That's absurd. Do you know what the Scripture says? You know what I'm doing when I do that? I'm pushing them away. And so the challenge is this for every one of us. How do I take the Scripture that I know to be true and the wisdom that I find in Scripture and use it in such a way that draws them to me rather than pushing them away? There's something huge about that, and I think that's where you and I have got to change the way we look at. When you look at Scripture in light of a struggling teen, it looks completely different. And so all the things that we're doing, but I first have to know what I'm speaking to. And so if I know that they're exposed to everything, and a child is sitting there wanting to have somebody pay attention to them, and so they'll go, well, nobody's paying attention to me. Click, 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 whatever, and I can get attention, I'll do it because I'm driven for that. Or I'll go, well, I don't know what the... See what I'm saying? It's because your child is hearing the F-bomb dropped just as much in their cafeteria line waiting to get their corn dog, or whatever they're eating at school while they're going through line. They're hearing it more there than they are anywhere else. And we get so concerned, well, their music is so bad. I'd leave that one alone. There's other battles to fight. There's other things to win. Does that sound like a little bit too much? My point of it is that because they're so exposed, I've got to know that they're being exposed, but the issue isn't to stop the exposure because that's not going to happen. They will be exposed to everything eventually. The job I have as a parent is figuring out, okay, how do I take that and apply Scripture to it and move toward my child so they'll want to come to me and ask questions? See the challenge? That's the challenge of parenting. I wish I can give you the answer to all that. I can't. I can stimulate thought. I can go, you need to think about this, but it changes the way I look at kids. I had a kid who's a son of a pastor. That sounds different, doesn't it? Son of a pastor. And I didn't mean to say it that way, but and this kid cusses like a sailor. And I'm not against the Navy or anything, but I mean, guy cusses. Yeah, I just sit there and listen, and it's, quite honestly, it's real offensive to me, because you could tell he's just cussing for the sake of getting attention and everything else. And so we're in this little group meeting, and I said, whoa, hey, his name's Ware. Ware, come here. Let's talk for a second. Dude, you don't need to cuss you don't need to get my attention that way. I'm all ears, I'm all listening. I know it just slips out. I know, but just, you don't have to do that. Sometimes it's a cheap shot, I think, and there's other ways to express yourself. He goes, well, yeah, give me some other words. And I thought that's insightful, because sometimes those cuss words are the only thing that they can really describe the feelings they have. And I would venture to say that you might think that too. I have realized that I cuss a lot more than I used to in my head. Do you? I see things that I wouldn't have watched 10, 15 years ago. Do you? I'm more tolerant. I don't think I've blushed in a long, long time. I really don't think I have. And I've lived with 35 high school girls. I mean, I just don't blush. And really, when I hear people, it used to be that if you heard somebody on an airplane or at a restaurant drop the F-bomb, somebody'd stand up and go, you need to shut up, not say that. I'll take you outside. And now it's no big deal. I hear it all the time. And I just want you to give credit to your kids that they're living in a world where things are being thrown around like crazy. And most of their motivation is just to get attention. Now, I'm setting you up. I want you to know I'm setting you up. I'm setting you up to be the relationship that they're not getting anywhere else. And my hope is that you will have the relationship with them because you understand what you're doing. You follow me? Okay, let me keep going. They may feel like this God thing doesn't work. It's crazy. We've already gone 2 hours. They may feel like this God thing doesn't work. And that's one of our jobs is to spend some time helping them understand, how does this God thing work? How does it work? How do you put into play in the world that they live in? And I think that's where the biggest challenge becomes. And so my point of it, and I've already talked about them being created for a relationship, is moving from this teaching model to a training model. Probably one of the most significant things I think we can talk about. And I want to go through this so we can spend some time at lunch even talking about it or looking at questions, then we'll come back. And I understand. You guys have a lot of questions, so you guys must really be screwed up. And so so I was thinking maybe 1 or 2, 3 or 4, but we'll dive into it, because the questions are really where the rubber meets the road. And you go, okay, all this stuff you're talking about, how do I apply it now? And I think some of this may help you just a little bit. But when you move from a teaching to a training, you're sharing information in a teaching world, because it needs to be a lot of information. And you're bombarded with it. You have a lot to share. This is about you. It's your time that you share information with your child. When they start moving up here, they don't want to know more information. They want to know, how do I apply this? And if wisdom are the right principles, the applied principles of right living, it's basically saying, how do I take this stuff that you've taught me and apply it here? And how do I make that work? Are you following me on that? And that's where wisdom comes in. And you say, well, wait a minute. And the tendency is this. Here, because you've done so well, you get coffee mugs and T-shirts and that say world's greatest mom and world's greatest dad and world's greatest papa. And you get the idea that you go, I'm really good. I'm doing this parenting thing unbelievable. Well, I'll just keep doing the same stuff up here. This is the only time that I will tell somebody they're wrong. If you think that the tools that you use during their preteen years is going to work during their teen years, you are wrong. And what you may be doing is provoking your child to wrath. You follow me? Parents that we have of the kids that live with us and have forever are wonderful parents. They are wonderful parents. If the kids walked in here, you'd look at them and go, man, that's the finest looking group of kids I've ever seen, except for maybe one or two of them. But you'd go, they're a good group of kids. It's that the parents haven't known what to do when they get up here because they really think all the tools in their parenting toolbox are going to suffice up here and they need to get some new tools, is what it is. So it moves from here, from information, to now the applied part of it, to wisdom. Now, I know this from personal experience. You are capable of writing a book. When somebody came to me and said, you need to write a book, I'm going, I don't think that way. I've spoken at camps, young life stuff, all over the place. I've spoken at church 3 or 4 times a week. All that. But here I am, 50 years old, and somebody says, you need to write a book. I'm going, I can't do it. I don't know what wisdom I have. Well, when I started to say, I kind of begged God for it because I think I really wanted to write a book. Because there's something about if you write a book, then evidently God loves you or something, but there's just something about that if you do that. And I thought there was some validation for me because I was told I was stupid all my life by my dad. And I thought, well, if I wrote a book, then maybe that will help. Every one of us has the ability to dig deep and find wisdom. And wisdom's gathered by observation, reflection, and experience. That which you've observed, and what have you seen in your life? That which you think about, and that which you experience. O-R-E. What is it that's unique about your life that you can say, this is what I've learned? When I try to apply Scripture to this situation, perhaps it's a car accident where somebody's killed. Perhaps it's losing your home like we did in a tornado. What do we learn from that? When we were flooded in New Orleans, what did we learn from that? What we learned was we'd rather have our house burned down than flood. We learned a lot of other stuff. When this kid told me to F off and put things in places I never knew would fit, what was God trying to teach me in that? When there was a kid that I knew that committed suicide, I know 45 kids who've taken their life. What is God trying to teach me? The tendency is that I think that I'm there to teach them. When quite honestly, I think God has placed those kids in my life to teach me something. And it's just the perspective of going, what is it I'm supposed to learn from them? And that's where you start merging this thing called wisdom. What I've seen, what I think about, and what I have experienced, how do I put this in with the things that I have embraced? Follow me? We all have it. Scripture says if any one of you lacks wisdom, do what? Ask of God. And I would say, God, show me. Show me what I'm supposed to learn out of this situation. Sorry. But we don't spend enough time doing that. We don't spend enough time sitting down and thinking through, how are we going to get through this? How are we going to get to the other side and apply the things that I know? How do I take this stuff about what I know about Scripture, about homosexuality, and how do I apply it to a child that says, Dad, I think I'm gay? You need to talk to your mom. That may be the answer. I've got to go mow the yard. I mean, it really is. That's where the rubber meets the road. When your son comes to you and says, Dad, I've been having, like mine did, I've been having an affair with a young lady out in California. This was 9 months after he got married. I'm going to kill you. And he's the one that I've always said taught me to say, Adam, there's nothing you can do to make me love you more. There's nothing you can do to make me love you less. Kind of my signature comment, except when he told me that. I wanted to kill him. It's just saying that someplace there's a point of wisdom. So how do I handle it in those times when things aren't going well? How do I apply the things in the struggle rather than thinking that everything's perfect? And it means that you buy all my books and read every one of them. But the other, is the change of mindset that I've got to start sharing something different. I find, for me, it means I quit talking all the time. So I move from talking here, which works well in a teaching model, and I move here to start listening. I'm going to listen. Most of my time is just spent listening. Tell me what you think about this. Wow. Matter of fact, most of my counseling stuff that I do, I sit down with kids and I go, wow. Sorry, it's my daughter. I'm not listening to her. I just lost my train of thought. Say that again? Most of the time I speak with kids, it's more my response. Wow. Jeez. Really? Wow. They get up and leave and go, man, that was the best counseling session I've ever had. And I'm going, and it's because somebody listened to them. I do this. If you listen to our radio program or even on podcast, on the podcast, I interview kids, and it's kids that live with us, and it's for them to talk. It's not for me to share stuff. But I usually start out. I'm going to tell you, here's a little technique, and you can do this. Why I like telling you to text your kids and ask questions, because I think you need to get into a mode of asking questions and quit giving answers. And so I ask kids, I go, how'd you get here? Well, I was sending nudes. I was having sex. My parents and I were, really, why were you having sex? Well, I wanted somebody to like me. Why do you want somebody to like you? Nobody likes me. Why didn't anybody like you? Well, I've kind of gone off the deep end. Why have you gone off the deep end? Well, nobody paid attention to me. Why does anybody not pay attention to you? I've done stupid things. Why do you do stupid things? Just to get attention. Well, what do you do to get attention? Anything that gets them to want to spend time with me. Why do people not want to spend time with you? I don't know how to have a relationship. Why don't you know how to have a relationship? I've really never known how to have a relationship. Why have not? I was treated awful growing up. Why were you treated awful? I did some things I shouldn't have. Why'd you do that? Well, some things happened to me. What happened to you? I went to church camp in 4th grade, and a guy took advantage of me. See what's happening? It's called reflective listening. Whatever they say, I'm going to take whatever their answer is and put it into a question. Are you following me on that? So they know that I'm hearing them because I'm listening. But what's happening is it keeps going deeper and deeper. What's my response? Wow. Wow. I can try to fix it. I can try to, let me give you an answer. Well, Scripture says this. There's a story of, wow, and leave it alone. Why? Because if I don't try to fix it all the time, which is my tendency, we're going to get together again, and where are we going to start? Hey, tell me about the church thing that you went to. And I don't want to talk about it. Why don't you want to talk about it? Makes me feel uncomfortable. Why do you feel uncomfortable? See what I'm doing? I'm trying to move to the core issue here rather than just trying to control the behavior. But it moves, it happens when you spend time listening. Give it a shot. Ask your child a question and don't give an answer or don't try to fix it. And whatever they say. You following me? Have a Tuesday night that is a no tech Tuesday. Then you tell everybody, just put your phones up. Nobody has phone. Even you get to lock them up, put them in the other room, turn them off. You're not going to interfere. On Thursday, have an all-tech Thursday where everybody, the rules are this: to come eat dinner, you will text them. Everybody has to have a phone, and you cannot say one word. Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? Okay, time to eat. Ding, 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 around the house. They get down there, the prayer. You already have it written out. Ding, 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 ding. Everybody's got to respond if a question is asked. And the first one would be, can you pass? What do you guys eat here?
Chicken and pork.
Oh, yeah, you guys got that funny barbecue here, don't you? Yeah. That funny barbecue, whatever it is. Okay, pass the chicken, ding, 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 ding. Hey, pass this, ding, 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 ding. Everybody's doing that. And then you ask a question. In one word, explain the week. Everybody's got to respond. If they don't respond, they lose their phone for a week. Okay? And it's in one word, ding, 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 ding. It goes around. Now they're writing back to you. What's one thing that you would change about yourself if you could? Ding, 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 ding. They're writing back to you. What would you change about our family? Ding, 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 ding. What would you change about me? And what you're doing is showing them an example of how to listen to somebody else without correcting them, telling them where they're wrong, or how they need to do something different. But my hope is this. My hope is that a child would say, what do you guys think about me? What's one thing you would change about me? Are you following me? Yep. Monkey see, monkey do. If you don't ask the questions, they're not going to be asking questions. You're teaching them by your example. But it's moving because I'm listening to something different. I'm just saying, I'm going to listen to you. And when they speak, if you ask for it, hey, what's getting in the way of our relationship? Well, Dad, you're such a jerk. You know what your response is? Okay. Because the minute you correct it, tell them they're wrong, Dad, you're a know-it-all. I knew that. No, don't say that. But I think it's, at some point, it's saying, I need to hear what you have to say, and I want them to be brutally honest, and I'm just going to let it set. Because I want them to hear what I say when I'm brutally honest, and them not come back and yell and scream at me. Well, Dad, you're so stupid. Why would you say something like that? That's ridiculous. They get that from somewhere. Heartlight doesn't change anybody. The 60 kids that live with us, we don't change a one of them. Not one of them. We create the atmosphere for change to happen, but we don't change them. We don't at all. We create an atmosphere where people can talk and they listen, and we challenge thinking patterns. And we have a psychiatrist that helps with some kids who are really struggling through some difficult times and may need some temporary help or may need some long-term help because there is a mental illness involved with it. But it's a matter of creating that atmosphere for change to happen, creating the structure that they can walk, that they feel like they're benefiting from. And it's surrounding them by relationships that hopefully they'll get a taste of the character of God in the process because they get to see relationships being fleshed out in some way. And we listen. And we listen to whatever that is. The minute we think that we know it, we're wrong. I can't tell you the answer for every kid that's with us. I wish there was an easy answer to give or an easy antibiotic to give or a certain procedure that you do. It's not. It's unique. We raise our kids and tell them they're unique, right? And then when they get into trouble, we make them like everybody else. They're just as unique then as they are any other time. Instead of giving answers, I'm going to start asking questions. Because the minute I give an answer, they don't search anymore. I'm going to let them come up with the answer. Hey, what would you think if we did this differently? What's one thing you would change about our family? If you were living in Ukraine right now, what do you think you'd be thinking about? Hey, what do you think about the president of Ukraine keeping everybody 16 to 60 years old to fight for their country? Hey, do you think everybody in Russia thinks Putin is really as bad? Another question, would you name your child Putin one day? I mean, throw some humor in there. But I mean, it's asking questions. And why am I asking? Am I asking for the platform for me to share with you what I think so that I can just become another Fox News and start puking out all the information? Or is it to listen to them and have them just share what they're thinking? Why? Because what I'm wanting is if I don't show my child that I can ask questions, they're never going to ask me questions. And my hope is that they'll come to me and say, well, hey, what do you think about that? And what's my first answer? I don't know. I need to think about that. Now, I do know what I think, but I do it as a tactic because I want them to know it's okay to not know. And the minute I answer it, then they're going to stop thinking. Are you guys following me on that? It just means I'm going to let them come to the conclusion. Why? I'm not coming to the conclusion for them like I have here. I'm letting them come to the conclusion. I'm teaching them to think and process. Why? Because I believe that all the seeds that have been sown into their life, as Scripture says, will come to fruition one day. So my job isn't to plant more seed. It is to cultivate. And so this is the cultivation process. You can overseed, for those of you who, you can overseed a field. You can put seed, and then you can put more seed, and it'll mildew and rot on you. And you're going to cause a problem for the field. You're going to tarnish a field by doing that. You can't put out too much seed. Somebody goes, well, put out more seed and more stuff will grow. It doesn't work that way. So my point is, it's cultivating. So that's what I'm going to do, is churn the soil, basically, any way that I can. I'm going to move from telling to sharing. Instead of telling them this is what you're going to do, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we think about this? Why don't we? And somebody goes, well, you're not giving any directive as a parent. You know what? There's structure that needs to be developed. And as I said, we'll talk about that. But I'm sharing ideas and thoughts so that they have an interest in me. You may be sharing things that they don't care anything about. Well, back in the day, well, that's not how we did it. Well, when I was in high school, I realized this. I was in high school. Next year, we have our 50th reunion. Yeah, tell me. Who would have ever thought we would have got there? And for me to say that, well, when I was in high school is about as antiquated as me saying in 1973, 50 years ago, was 1923. That something in 1923 applied to 73, or that now something in 73 applies to 2023. How ridiculous is that? You know, now it's only, Scripture does, and that's about it, and maybe relationships, but the challenge is then applying it to kind of a new world in one sense, rather than always getting them to go back to an old world that doesn't exist anymore and they'll never live in. You follow me on that? It's easier to go to the old place. It's kind of like somebody who's 17 years old who thinks those were the best years of their life. Are you kidding me? I live in a real small town. There's 4,000 people that live in our town. Now, we're 10 minutes from a Starbucks. That's how we measure civilization, that it's close to us. We can get to a Starbucks in 10 minutes. But we live in a small town, and those people still talk about that one football game that everything changed, or who was homecoming queen, and I'm going, who cares? You're talking about antiquity. Or who cares that I lettered in so-and-so, or I swam in Arkansas? Well, you do because you're a swimmer. But all those things you go, nobody cares until they ask. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing things that are pertinent to them. The other guy, I'm going to move from lecture. Andragogy is the study of adult learning. Andragogists will tell you that adults only retain 8%, 8 or 9% of lecture. So think about what kids will actually retain. Nothing. So it's moving up here. Now you have discussion. If you're still lecturing kids, it's not working because that's not the way they process. It's moving from here, punishment, that where you want them to feel a sense of pain. Your kids will continue to do inappropriate behavior until the pain from their behavior is greater than the pleasure they get from it. Bob was telling me that Bob, right? Well, your child will continue to do what they do because it works. And so they won't stop. And so there's a part of it here where you just say, I want you to feel some kind of uncomfortableness to move you out of that pattern of thinking, which is reflecting something else. Behavior is just the visible expression of the invisible issues. So what you see is not always what you get. There's something driving it. So the reason you don't want them doing certain things, because it's inappropriate, but there's thinking behind it that needs to change. Over here to discipline, and discipline is helping a child get to where they want to go and keeping them from where they don't want to end up. Do you see how I now become an ally rather than an enemy? If I go, I will help you get to where you want to go, and I will keep you from ending up where you don't want to go. Now it changes. That's discipline. It's like a coach. If any of y'all have been a coach or have had a coach, what does a coach do? Helps you get where you want to go. Keeps you from not ending up at a place you don't want to be. It's the same thing with discipline. So as I set out a structure and say, this is what we want for you, this is what I'll do for you, this is what I want from you, it's all about that I'm on your side. I'm here to help you. It's not always viewed that way here. Am I running out? I am.
On your side. I'm here to help you.
It's all yours.
Go ahead.
But it just means that I'm going to shift the way that I'm engaging so that I become somebody, I'm going to help you. The rules that I come up with have got to help a child get to a better place. It's not just having them feel a sense of pain. It really is saying that at some point you're going to get to a better place and I'm going to help you. See the difference between the two? It moves from words here to actions here. Training. It doesn't matter what you say, it's all about it's not your words, it's your, and yet we keep going after him here with words when I go, you know what, I want to see all that put into actions. And so here's the thing for you too, that it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. Are you following me? And that's a little bit different. As an example before kids, it's all about your actions. Now, at the same time, I would tell you this. I think your spirituality is not something that you do. It is something that you are. So out of the abundance of your heart, your mouth speaks. Out of your blameless walk, there's fruit that comes from that. But it is seen here by your actions. You can say whatever you want. They want to see the life behind it that's backing it up. Are you following me? So quit talking so much and start working on being that blameless person, before them. Here's another that this is you doing everything for them. And the great divide begins to happen here when you quit doing their science project at school and you let them start doing it. Because we still have that tendency. You ever go to those science fairs, and all it is all the moms and dads competing against each other, The kid doesn't know what the fat's going on at the deal. Drop an egg. Look, dry ice in a volcano. Oh, wow. And so it's them. I need you to start doing things, which means this. I need to give up stuff, which means this. It's their homework that they need to do. Well, but if I don't help them, they'll flunk. I tell kids all the time. And here I am, a founder of a boarding school. We're an accredited boarding school. And my comment to them is, I don't care whether you flunk or pass. Doesn't make any difference to me. Doesn't make any difference. It really doesn't bother me. You can make all Fs if you want. I don't care really whether you graduate this program or not. You can better yourself or you cannot better yourself. What am I doing? I'm saying this is your deal. This isn't mine. I'm transferring it to you. Whether you do it or not, I really don't care. You want a job? And I think everybody ought to have a job. I think when kids go to work, what they learn is a sense of value. They learn about money. I think, what's the number one problem that newlyweds have when they get married? It's money issues. My granddaughter had her first job at 16, which I thought was kind of weird. So she has it at 16, and she gets her first paycheck. You know what her comment was? That's it? This is all I get? This is all I get? I wish she would have learned it a lot earlier. And so, because she's still begging me now at 21. Well, what about this? Why don't you buy me this? Why don't you buy me that? There's a part of it where it's them doing things. It means I've got to give it up. I've got to let them do it. Because I want them to learn that they can do it. You follow me? 1 through 12, you're going to be at church every time the doors open, whether they allow coffee in the sanctuary or not. Is this called a sanctuary or a auditorium? Yeah. Whether they allow it or not, you're going to church. You're going to be there every day. At age 13, you're going to continue to go. At age 14, you can cut back on a couple of things if you want. At age 15, I want you to go to church. I want you to go to the youth group thing. I want you to go to one other spiritual thing. At age 16, I want you to go to any church you want to, but you got to go somewhere. At age 17, you don't have to go if you don't want to. What am I doing? As for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. That's what it's going to be. Is that what I'm doing? Not at all. What I'm doing is transferring it to them where they're the ones making the decision. They are the one choosing what to do. The other thing is this. If your kid goes through a tough time and is going through just a difficult time, they're going to hate the thing that you love the most. You love Jesus, and they're going to hate him. They're going to get back at you. What are they doing? They're really showing that they're in control. And I'm going, give it to them. Let them be in control. And if they mess up, they mess up. Is that easy? No, it's not easy. There's always a risk that the consequences may be great on those things. Now, it doesn't mean just carte blanche, I let them do anything. I'm not saying that. But I give them more things to do, so if they flunk a class, wow. If you flunk that class, you're going to have to go to summer school. How are you going to do that? Maybe the way you get your child off of playing video games all the time is require they have a job. Because they get that sense of value, they get that sense of money, they feel like they usually have to deal with the public and deal with problems and issues. They learn how to serve. I mean, there's a value in a good day's work. There's something about that. I don't care if you have $1 billion, your child needs to work. They need to learn. What's the first thing God did with Adam when he created him? Gave him a job. Go take care of the garden. Plant a garden. Dig up your yard. Just dig it up. No, I'm joking. People are going, no way. We're not digging up our yard. But create something. There's something healthy about that. But it moves from you doing it to them doing it. Your responsibility to their responsibility. It moves from immaturity here to moving to here where it's all about maturity. And maturity, as I said earlier, is transferred through the assumption of responsibility. So I'm going to be giving them more things. So if you want an exercise, what 4 things right now are you doing for your kids that they can do for themselves? And I'm talking about 13 on up. What 4 things are you doing that they should do for themselves? And start transferring it. If you don't feed the cat, we're going to shoot it, kind of thing. Or give them, guess what we're having for lunch today? No. Get them a dog. FFA has said for years and years, if you want to keep a kid out of trouble, give them an animal and make them take care of it. There is something about that that's important. And if it doesn't work, then get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Sorry, we're not going to do it. What can you give them? Maybe you've got a 17-year-old at home and you're waking them up out of bed every morning. You are not helping your child. When my dad was 17, he woke up in a destroyer in the middle of the Pacific fighting a world war. Some of our kids can't even get out of bed on their own. What's going to happen when they leave home and go off to school? Quit cooking breakfast for them every morning and have them figure out how to cook on their own. And it doesn't mean you're being mean to them. It means I'm shifting from this when I treated you like this. Now I'm treating you something different because we want something different. And you make sure you have all the stuff there for them to make. Are you following me on that? I'm doing it to prepare them for the next step in life. From your decisions to their decisions. And as I said, there's always a risk. I'm going to let you decide. What 4 decisions can you let them start making now? You decide. You figure out. Some of you don't even let them figure out where you're going to go eat dinner. I'd say I took my son into a McDonald's once and he was like 8 years old, 7 years old. You need to order. He goes, You need to order or you're not going to eat. So he sat there and watched me eat. I was great. Never had a problem with it again. We walked in, he walks up, I know exactly what I want. But my point of it is it feels mean because we're not taking care of them, but you're still trying to please them and protect them and provide for them. You've got to move into preparing them for that next stage of life. Are y'all catching on to what I'm saying? Okay, well, 4 of you are. And then you move from dependence to independence. You want them to be independent, don't you? Okay, anybody here want a 25-year-old clown on a couch playing video games when they're 25? Then you got to move away from it. Have you got a plan when they turn 18? What's going to happen? Well, you can stay at home. I talked to a kid that's 26 years old, lives in California. His dad is a Screen Actors guy. And his name's Matt. Matt, dude, you're 26 and you're living at home. Don't you want to live in an apartment? Don't you want to get out on your own? Don't you want to have something different? Don't you want it to be, don't you want to invite friends over to your own place? And he goes, and leave this? Exactly right. Sometimes we create that thing, and I've told his dad, you're not helping him. You're going to destroy his marriage. You're going to destroy his marriage. And so it's just saying that you've got to have that plan. When you turn 18, we want you to go to school, get a job or whatever. Or if you have a child that's living at home now, that is 22 and doesn't know what to do, that you go, we got a plan for you to move out. We'll pay 100% of the first month's rent, 90% of the next month, 80%, 60%, and go down. But we want you to be on your own. And you create the need. The reason your child is playing video games all the time is because he's bored out of his mind and he doesn't have anything else to do. Then fill that time up. You require them to have a job, you'll get your, quit paying for all of school. This one family came to me last week. I was in New Jersey, and they said what we did was force our kid to take out loans for all their schooling, and if they graduated, then we'd pay for all the loans. And I thought, that is a wise move. And not everybody gets to qualify that way, but they did it to motivate the child. And so, of course, he didn't rack up all the money, but you look at the amount of debt that people are getting out of school with now, it is absolutely amazing to me. And there's no possible way to pay it off. You move from your control to their control. I'm going to give you control. And it's telling them, I don't want to control your life. I want you to control your life. So ask them, text them right now. What can we give you control of that we currently have control of? Ask them. What do we have control of that we can give you control of? And you're setting the stage. Why are you asking that? Because I want you to take control. Following me? This may be a hard one for some of y'all. You move from perfection to imperfection. You guys like being around perfect people? I don't. I don't at all. Matter of fact, I can't stand it. I love being around imperfect people. There's something about that just makes me feel more comfortable. I don't have this expectation level that's up there. I just feel normal. I would venture to say that more of you are more connected to me because you know that Jane and I went through counseling. I saw a few of you go, maybe we aren't so bad. Or that the way I was raised and can't breathe out of one side of my nose, or that I mentioned that my son had an affair. I would also tell you, as I did, that my wife was sexually abused for 7 years by a grandfather and also by her father a year after we got married. That my daughter wrestled with an eating disorder when she cheered at Baylor University. I can go on. That really how I ended up in Texas was that I got fired from a job in Branson because they were all wrong and I was right. And that we lost our home in a tornado, we lost our home in a flood. I can go on and on. But chances are you probably relate with those things. I've got a kidney disease that my mom died from, that my aunt died from, my grandfather died from, and it probably will kill me. And when I start sharing that my brother's an atheist, that I can go on and name all the imperfections that I can name all the imperfections, and that will draw us together. Or I'll start naming all the good things. That's not going to attract anybody. And it's the same way with your kids. You want perfection here when you're in a teaching mode. That works because you need perfect teaching. Training, you're talking about the imperfections. This is what can go wrong. This is what went wrong in my life. This is what I did wrong. And they'll start asking questions about that. So it may be that you start setting the atmosphere a little bit. Here, of course, you try to maintain perfection. Here, when you move up to the imperfection, it may be your daughter, your 16-year-old daughter going, hey, Mom, you and Dad ever have sex before you got married? She's asking for a reason. And matter of fact, it's the question you've been waiting for. This is what you've been practicing for all your life. Your child has finally come to you to ask you a question. And it's just not a sexual question. They want to know, how do I get through this? This is your time to make that connection. Now, I got to make sure I look at everybody when I've asked that question, because somebody will say, he looked right at me, honey. He knows, So I just want to make sure I don't know any of that. But you see what's happening? Is that they're wanting to make a connection, and this is where you start telling them things. And it's okay to tell them those things, because they know you're imperfect anyway. Follow me? Your son comes to you and says, hey, Dad, did you smoke pot when you were in high school? No, but your mother did. They're asking a question. They're in a world where it's all acceptable now. I mean, truly. I mean, it's been approved in so many places, 36. It's just, and it will be more and more and as the days go ahead. But they want to know. And well, I did, but it wasn't as powerful as it is today. Well, I did, but I didn't inhale. It's all those things. And I go, your child is asking you for wisdom. And you can spend time going, well, I violated God and had sex with your dad. Or you may talk about the relational aspects of it and say this, instead of saying, and honey, this is why we don't want you to have sex, is because Scripture says, why don't you say this? This is sure not information. My fear is that kids are just looking at Scripture as another piece of information. And so that's my challenge, is always, how do we bring about the wisdom of God into the minds and hearts of kids? Now, that'd be a title of a chapter somewhere. Sweetheart, I found this, that when you have sex before marriage, it can confuse the relationship. And if it does, you may lose the very person that God's put in your life as your mate. And so just be careful. I know the longings. I understand this. I understand that. No, you'll have an. I know you may get married one day. But I'd watch it, because you don't want to confuse and risk the relationship. That moves from information to wisdom. Son, don't smoke pot because your babies will be born naked if you do. You can share information. If you have an information war with your child about marijuana and alcohol, because that's the first thing that kids will do, well, alcohol is more dangerous than marijuana. You know what? They're absolutely right. You just look at the numbers. I mean, just look at the numbers anywhere. Go to any website anywhere. More people die from alcohol abuse and alcohol use than marijuana. So I can't use that one. It's just not going to work. I need to share some wisdom. What would be the wisdom? That which I've observed, that which I've thought about, and that which I've experienced. So in this is what I found out. Look, one day you will have the chance to do anything you want. From 21 on, when you're on your own, you can make all the choices you want. I can love you whether you smoke pot. I can love you whether you don't smoke pot. But I know this, from what I've seen, is that smoking during your adolescent years, during your teen years, has an amazing way of changing your motivation. It changes your perspective on things. You're not thinking right, and you're becoming dependent on something that's not healthy for you. And it'd be about as wise as a teacher going to teach class, having to drink a half a bottle of wine, before she ends up. There's just something not right about this. So I don't want you to be dependent on anything. And so that's why I'm standing strong on not letting you smoke pot. When you're out on your own, I can still love you whether you choose whatever you do. Just don't do it in our house. See how that's wisdom as opposed to, well, the frontal lobe of your cerebral cortex is... Is that even the right words, Doc? Well, I don't even know your brains, what am I, a neurosurgeon? Trying to explain to them the use of what it's developing and what it's not. And I'm going, go with what I know, what God has taught me. See, that gives perspective, because there's a connection. So you move from perfection to imperfection. You craft character into coaching character. You move from what you do to who you are. in one sense, I don't have to do a devotion at home at dinner every time. Preteen, I may choose to do that. Up here, I don't have to do that because the greatest devotion that they can see is me. Or they can, in our case, their mom, because she's far more of a display of God's grace and goodness than I am. See what I mean? It has more to do with who we are than what we say or do. And I think sometimes we cheapen that a little bit, feeling like I've got to have the right words and all that stuff. You don't. You don't. It is the character that you show your child. It's the blamelessness. It's how you handle situations. It's how you treat that waiter, how you treat that waitress, how you drive a car. When you're offended by somebody that's done you wrong, how you respond to them. And that is your message right there. And it's really where this is the Christian life is taught. This is where the Christian life is caught. And if you keep trying to teach up here, you will lose the kids, but you'll also miss out on the opportunity to transfer a concept of how they think to something that's going to stick. They're thinking concretely here. They think abstractly here. And because they think differently, their perception of everything is completely different. So if you try to, put old wine into old wineskins there, you need to shift and put a different new wine into new wineskins because you're dealing with two different things. You guys follow me so far on all this? Okay. So anyway, it is now 12:20. We've gone almost 3 hours, which it goes fast. We're going to take a break for lunch. I don't know how long lunch is going to last. I mean, they've cooked up the cat for us in the back, and it's still roasting. And I'm joking about. Is anybody here a veterinarian? Okay, no, okay. So the title of the book is "When You've Lost Your Best Furry Friend," so it does apply to cats, not intentionally, but by mistake. And so let's do the lunch. You need to announce anything about lunch? Why don't you announce anything? I'm going to look through questions and get those things done, and I'll see you in there in just a minute.
Okay. Now it's on. All right, we're going to take a break. Let's do 45 minutes. Now, Mark has said and would like to interact. He'll read through some questions and stuff during lunch, but hopefully a lot of y'all either brought or you'll run somewhere close by and then come back into the fellowship hall where you can have food or coffee if you would like. And we'll take about 45 minutes. For those of you that are online, take a break for about 45 minutes. And Jeff, flash the time up here if you would, or just tell me what time is it and then what time will we come back. Oh, you got a countdown. Okay, great. You just put the countdown for folks online. That'd be great. All right, and again, if you've got questions, please write those, put them in the basket, and we'll come back in about 45 minutes after our lunch. Thanks, guys. All right. Thanks for all the questions you've written in. Mark will, I'm sure, have a few comments about that in just a minute. So we're going to bring him back up and let's get started again.
You guys are so messed up. It is. It is unbelievable. No, it's good. Yeah, it's just normal stuff. That's probably why you guys like this church. There's some churches that I go into that would not admit that there's an issue or anything else. I spoke at a church. They had 4 kids that committed suicide in this community, and they wanted me to speak to the high school folks, and but yet they wouldn't admit that something had went wrong, that had gone wrong, and I can tell you where it is. It's up in Princeton, in New Jersey, and they asked me not to talk about academics. Don't talk about academics and in Princeton. And I said, well, then that means I've got to talk about academics, and because it's causing the pressure and everything else. And so anytime somebody tells me not to talk about something, I'm pretty much going to talk about it. I mean, because there's a reason why, and so I'm not afraid to tackle some of those things. You know, it's interesting to me that at that church, there were no questions that anybody had, none, and you just kind of go, okay, this isn't my kind of church. You know, I would rather be the church that wrestles together to try to figure something out, rather than one that knows everything. And in this case, evidently, they didn't know everything, because 4 of their kids decided to check out and say, I don't want anything to do with this. So that's kind of odd for 4 kids at a high school that all went to the same church. It says something. It's a pretty big church, but it's kind of odd. So I want to talk about a couple of things. I never realized my head was so white. My hair was so white. You know, you ever do that? Where, look, I can see each side and see it differently. I had a lot of cancer in the back of my head and was treated a few years ago, and was sick for 4 or 5 months, and from all the treatment that they did, but they targeted the back of my head, and it literally has turned my hair white in the back, and it looks different. And somebody says, well, it looks like you've kind of done something to it. And I go, well, it's amazing what chemotherapy will do, and a little bit different, but I enjoy watching myself get older in these things. Thank you. Not really. You know, there's a few things here that I want to make sure we get through, because I do want to spend time. We really only have 45 minutes. It's at 1. But I want to make sure we get through this, and I want to kind of breeze through it, and I'll tell you where you can get some further stuff on this and share with you some things, because I want to spend time answering the questions, because I think that's where the kind of the rubber meets the road on stuff. The first thing, I'm going to use this relationship circle here that you see, that I would call it this circle right here. And basically, we've kind of talked about it, but it's asking the questions that you might be asking of what is it about me that's getting in between the relationship that you have with your child? I ask this of kids all the time. What am I doing that's pushing you away? What do I represent to you? What do I? One kid said last week, he goes, well, because you're old. Thank you. You'll never graduate. And I go, well, what do you mean by the old thing? And he goes, well, you see things differently than I see it. Fair game. What is that? He goes, well, the pronouns and they, them, and which I think is stupid. And I go, okay, I get it, but I'm not so sure at the core of it that you're getting the level of respect that you want in your demand for people calling each other pronouns, as much as it would be calling them by their name, by their real name. And I'm not so sure how it sounds for me to be talking third person to somebody in plural, when it's really first person singular that I'm talking to, but I'm not really talking to them, I'm talking to you, but you're demanding that I call them they. And I go, I'm just not so sure how this fits, because I don't think you're getting what you want, and I want to help you get what you want. So if there's another way we can respect. So, I mean, you listen, and I'm not trying to explain it away. I'm trying to let them know that there's something more that I want for them. I'm always kind of tossing that out. I'm the first one to say, if they say, God, you're such a whatever it is, I go, I know. That's what my wife says all the time. You know, yeah, other people have told me that. You know what? My wife really doesn't say that all the time, and other people really haven't told me that, but it's something that I do to get my foot in the door where they feel like they can talk to me about stuff. Are you following me? We took a young lady, or a young girl came to, she wanted to come into the program, into Heartlight, and her name is Sarah, but she wanted us to call her Bob. And then she said, not only do I want you to call me Bob, I'd rather live in a guy's house than live in a girl's house. And I said, well, look, I'll call you whatever you want, but we don't divide them up by guys and girls. We divide them up by penises and vaginas. So it's whatever you got, that's where you'll be. And which I thought was funny. Evidently, you guys don't. And so, but I just said, I said, let's tell her this is how you were born, this is how it is. And I don't know how to handle it any other way, quite honestly, sweetheart. We ended up not taking her. So anyway, I told that story on a radio thing. I got a letter from somebody who oversees about 400 radio stations and saying, there's 2 problems I have with your comments you made with this gal. And I'm going, and I said, well, let me tell you that I never said that on radio. I said that on a podcast. And there's a difference. I watch what I say on radio. You have to. Podcast, I can kind of say whatever I want. That's why the podcast is a little bit more popular than the other. It's because you can mention whatever you want. But he said the fact that you said that you would call her Bob, or, well, one you said, when she said she was gay, that you said you don't care whether she's gay or not. I can't believe you don't care about kids enough to, and I go, whoa. Me saying that, if I say I really don't care whether you smoke cigars or not, I don't care, is not saying I don't care for you. I think that's a little far-fetched. I don't care what you drive. I really don't. I mean, doesn't mean I don't care about you. Whether you're gay or not, I don't care whether you're gay or not. I can still love you. It doesn't mean I don't care about them. So he was offended by that. And I said, well, that's hardly true. I mean, I've poured my life into kids forever. And then he went on and he said, but the fact that you said that you would call her Bob rather than her real name, what you're doing is giving permission for her to go have her breast cut off and having a fake penis implanted. That's exactly what I said. And I went, where in the world do you come up with going to that distance for? That just seems so absurd to me. Where do you even go there? And I said, I feel like I'm before the vice principal getting chewed out. I've told a story that's, well, you shouldn't have said that. No, I'm telling you, that's what I said to this girl because I was trying to get my foot in the door where I can engage with her so it doesn't really matter what she's called. I mean, are we really gonna stand and rip people apart over whether you call somebody Bob or Sarah? I mean, I'll call them anything. I'll stand on my head and spit nickels if I have to try to find a way to get into them. I'm not giving permission for them to do anything, nor am I saying that I think that this is the way for you to go. That's not my business. My point of it is that I've got to figure out ways to move into kids, into a culture that's a little bit devious and difficult. So I've got to try other things to get there. So I may admit things that I don't really feel, just to get in. I may play like I'm listening sometimes when part of me may be thinking about, well, what are we having for dinner tonight, chicken or fish? You know, but I want to develop habits of always coming across where they know that I'm listening. Are you guys following me on that? So maybe I'm saying I'm not as pure-hearted as I may be leading you to believe that I am all the time. Because there are times I really don't want to meet with kids. And there's times when I'm interviewing kids, I get bored out of my mind. But you learn what to say to get them to keep talking. Okay? I don't want you to feel like there's some super parent up here. The reason I can say the things that I do is because I've already been through the adolescent years with my kids and apologized for everything that I did wrong. because I spent more time. There's a reason why my child had an eating disorder, and there's a reason why my son drank like a fish when he went off to school. There's a reason for all those things, and I'm part of it. And so it's from there that I've learned those things, along with all the other kids that I've dealt with, that I've just learned the lessons. And so I don't want you to think I'm a perfect parent either, because I haven't been. I have been a perfect grandparent. And I do have a better relationship with my kids than I ever had when they were living at home. Matter of fact, I wouldn't trade one day to go back to those high school years. And so the same as you will turn the chapter on middle school and high school one of these days, and it will no longer matter. I mean, it's kind of like believing that you're going to spend the rest of your life looking at your wedding pictures. How often do you look at those? Or eat on that china that people give you? Are y'all given china when you get married and stuff? Not anymore. Well, if you have a need, we have some. And because I've got my mother's china and all the other stuff, and I mean, nobody eats on it. I mean, anyway, serve cat or something. But anyway, the one thing, this relationship circle, it's asking that question that, is there something about, there's only one person in this room that you can change, and that's you. I can't change anybody else. So what is it about me? And I ask that question. You may be loving your child wrong. I mean, if you're a Christian, then surely you know the 5 love languages, right? Because everybody does. It's amazing to me that a book written 30 years ago? Probably 1995. 15, 20, yeah, almost 30 years ago. A guy by the name of Dr. Gary Chapman wrote a book, 5 Love Languages. Have y'all studied that here at the church and done that? The 5 love languages are, the words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, acts of service, and touch. And the problem with that for me is that I don't want you to mow my yard. I don't want any gifts, because I have enough stuff already. We're trying to get rid of it. I really don't believe in words of affirmation. When you do public stuff, you get a little bit of both, and so you ignore them both. I don't have any time, and I don't want you to touch me. And so it doesn't, so they don't really have anything to do with me. And I always thought that those sound more like women's, because men have love languages of their own, like sarcasm. I mean, men speaking sarcasm to one another without the presence of women is a love language. If women are there, you don't need to be saying stuff like that. You're in trouble. And so competition is one of the other ones. I mean, there's different love languages. Moody Radio, where we used to record all of our radio programs in Chicago, they asked if I wanted to be on Gary Chapman's radio program. And it's a noon program. It's a noon program, and it's national, so it's on a few hundred stations, and it's a big deal and all that stuff. And so they said, well, when you take a break, let all your team go eat. You'll just come into another studio. And so I came into a studio. Gary is here somewhere here in North Carolina. Is anybody here related to Gary? Okay, so Gary's somewhere here in North Carolina. I don't know where. A guy named Chris Fabry, who's the host of the program, is in Tucson, Arizona. I'm in Chicago, and they make it sound like we're all in the same room. And we're really not. We're spread out. So I walk into the studio, and they say, well, we're ready. We go live in 5 minutes. And they hand me a script, and I go, what's this? It's a script. I go, well, I don't do scripts. And they go, well, Gary wants everything lined out. Well, I just don't do good. Then what's the point of me being here if it's all scripted out? And they go, well, Gary likes to have it written out so he knows where you're going. Okay. I'll do whatever. And so they cue music. Music comes on, and Chris jumps in and says, hey, folks, welcome to the Gary Chapman Relationship Hour, and here's your host, Gary Chapman. Then Gary comes on and says, hi, folks, it's Dr. Gary Chapman, 5 love languages, and we have a special guest today. It's Mark Gregston. He's going to talk to us about kids and all this stuff. Mark, how are you doing today? I'm fine. You're in Chicago. Why, yes, I am. I bet you, but where are you really from? I'm from Texas. I bet you have horses. Why, yes, we do. I bet you're wearing a pair of boots right now. Why, yes, I am. I mean, it was like that, everything just going. After about 10 minutes, I just said, Gary, let me ask you a question. Let me just ask you a question. And Chris jumps in and goes, Mark, I think, why don't we just stick with kind of what we were talking about? I said, no, I think I've got a question that everybody's going to want to hear the answer to this. Everybody's going to want to hear the answer to this. And Gary goes, well, Mark, what's the question? And I said, okay, Gary, do you think there's more than 5 love languages? And there was just a silence. and I went, because we used to think there were just 9 planets. I mean, Pluto's in, Pluto's out, Pluto's in, Pluto's out. And I said, in 1995, the same year that your book came out, they discovered the first exoplanet. Do you know how many exoplanets they've discovered since then? And he said, well, no. I said, 2,598. 2,598 other planets other than the 9 that we thought that there was. They've never asked me to come back on their program. Never. But I have spent a lot of time thinking, what are my love languages? And I've come up with this, that I think that my 2 love languages are that I want to be defended by those people that I've been loyal to. There's nothing that makes me feel better about myself and a relationship than when my wife stands up for me, when my kids say something positive, when somebody says, Mark would never say that. That doesn't happen that often. Most people go, Mark would probably say that, but I mean, there's just other things that when somebody stands up to me. And the second thing is, I want to be invited. I just want to be invited. I'm not going to show up, but I want to be invited. Those are my love languages. And I sat there and I thought, probably every teenage kid has those same love languages. They want to be represented some way, and at the same time, they want to be invited to things. Now, on a side note, that's why a child needs to have text among his friends, because everybody invites everybody through a text, and they get eliminated. They don't get invited to things. But the other part of it, I began to think, we get this idea that we're loving our kids one way, and we may be loving them the wrong way. Off of a book that was written 28 years ago, we're basing our patterns of love on something that was said way back then, thinking that that's adequate now, and that may not be how our kids are loved. It may be that your kid doesn't. Dr. Gary Smalley, who was our next door neighbor in Branson, Missouri for 7 years, he said that everybody was either a lion, an otter, a beaver, or a golden retriever. Matter of fact, it was our golden retriever that signed the first 100 books of his, that stamped them, and I sat there and I thought, I'm not an otter or a beaver or a lion or a golden, I'm not those. Somebody will tell you, well, on the idiotgram that you're either a 2, 4, 6, 8, or 9, or 12, and I'm going, no, I'm not that. 12's not on there. And for anybody, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But I'm going, when somebody says that I'm either a blue, green, red, or yellow, no, I'm really not. And we get this idea within circles that if we can just kind of figure out the categories that everybody's in, that we're going to love them that way. But here's the great misnomer of all that. I believe that each of us is uniquely and wonderfully made. And there is something so special about each one of us that we each have our own story. We each have our own value. We each have our own, we are so unique as people that God in his greatness just, and then we try to eliminate or try to push everybody down to here's 4 ways, or here's 4 colors, or here's 4 little animals that you've got. I go, we are cheapening the very thing that God has created. That's like saying every fingerprint fits one of 4 patterns. Well, it doesn't. None of them do. And my point of it is this: You may think you're loving your child based upon the 5 love languages. You may think you're loving your child based upon how you perceive love to be, and you may be loving them wrong. And it's just asking that question. You know, because if you're loving them wrong, if I thought that loving my wife was always giving her gifts, you need to know my wife really doesn't want gifts. She wants somebody to sit down and talk to her. She doesn't really care about, words of affirmation. That's not her deal. See what I'm saying? So maybe asking the question, text your child, do you think I'm loving you the right way? If I can love you in a better way, what way would it be? Because I want to know what this is here in this relationship circle. What is it about me that is getting in the way of keeping us? Dad, you're a know-it-all all the time. You don't need me to talk to. Dad, everything in your life is scripted out. Dad, you're so angry all the time. Dad, you're such a jerk to everybody. You hate my friends, you must hate me. I need to know that. And when somebody says that, what's the response? My first response is usually, I don't want to be that way. How can I repair that? See, the position that you take makes everything, it has everything to do with the relationship that you have. And that becomes important. Am I doing this the right way? Okay, the other thing is dealing with this structure thing. And the relationship issue, I would point you back to that when your teen is struggling and maybe the tough guys and drama queens. The structure is that when you put that together, it's basically saying a few things that are very easy conceptually. There's that workbook back there that can get you through it. But it's saying, what 5 things, in its simplest form, what 5 things do you want from your child? Just 5. If you can say, if you'll just do these 5 things, then I think we'll be okay. What would they be? Anybody have any ideas, thoughts? Respect? Just don't smoke pot? Honesty? Room clean? Shame on you. What's that? Talking without an attitude? If you just name those 5 things, what would those 5 things be? Just those 5 things. This is what we want from you. We want you to go to counseling. We want you to take the medication that doc says you need to take. We want you to just study 1 hour a day. That's all we're at. Whatever those 5 things are, if they'll just do those things, academic-wise, for the kids that live with us, where we homeschool all of them. So please don't hear any of my comments as anti-homeschool. We homeschool all of our kids. They go to school for 3 hours a day, and there's 5 teachers that spend time with them, helping them through all the curriculum. We use a Texas Tech curriculum, and it works for our kids. I tell everybody, no homework. No homework. All we want you to do is spend time doing what you're asked in that classroom, and that's it. No more. And so we get to develop that and kind of adapt a system, because not every kid who's struggling really has academics at the top of their list of priorities. And so it's saying, that whatever those things are, you've got to come up with those. If you'll just do these 5 things, then we'll be okay. And then you attach consequences to those. Now, this when you're formulating things. What are the 5 things? And then when you formulate them, then it may be, we want you to be respectful. And it may be that you be respectful by not having an attitude, by not trashing your brother and sister's clothes and room and all that. It may be by treating my wife or my husband with a great sense of respect. It may be not kicking the dog. Whatever respect looks like, you put bite into it and say, and if you are disrespectful, then you'll lose this the first time. What's going to get their attention? I'm going to take away the car. Let's say they have a car. Second time, you're going to lose car for a month. Third time, you're disrespectful. We're selling the car. Well, what am I supposed to do? It's not my problem. What did I just do? I put the responsibility on them. This is your deal. So if you don't want to lose the car, be respectful. Does it sound strong? Kids would know me as this. I think kids know that I love them, because I do. I mean, there's just a part of me, I really love kids. But the other side of it is that kids would tell you this: Mark doesn't tolerate anything. Anything. But that's not what they know me as first. They know me first that I love them and care for them. And I don't tolerate anything. When kids come to me and go, can you intervene in this? And I go, I don't think you want me to intervene in it. Consequence is going to be a lot stronger. I get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you're going to get up with me if that's what it's going to take, and we'll work. It's that. So I'm strong on one side, but that rarely shows itself or has to show itself because I'm working on the other more so. Are you following me at that? It doesn't work the other way around. So my point of it is, if I'm asking this from you, and there's consequences to this, then there's got to be something down here that go, if you'll do this, I will do this for you. Okay, would your kid quit smoking pot for $1? Okay, if you quit smoking pot, I'll give you $1.
No, that's not going to work.
What about $10? What about $100? What about $1,000? If you quit smoking pot for 6 months, I'll give you $5,000. See, there's a tipping point, isn't there? That your child say, I'll do it because my sacrifice, what you're asking me, is going to benefit me in some way. See what I'm doing here? So you start saying, I'll do this. I'm going to quit nagging you about music. Matter of fact, here's a set of beats. Stick them on your head, and you're going to love, and you get to listen to any music that you want. I think music is an expression, not an influence. And so you get to listen to it. Matter of fact, we're going to give you $300 a month or whatever it is. If you're 16 years old, we're going to give you $300 a month. You're going to buy your clothes, all your school stuff. Here's your allowance, food, activities, whatever it is. And if you're paying car insurance, add that to that money and give it to them and let them write you a check back. That's why I put it in the checkbook. Why? What am I teaching them? I'm teaching them about finances. Why do I teach about finances? Because the challenge is about debits and credits. You always have to have more money than you spend. It's a basic concept. And so I'm teaching them in the process. So if they spend all their money and can't write that insurance, what happens? Park the car. It's not my choice. It's their choice. If you flunk out of school, what is it? That's your choice. What am I doing? I'm building responsibility in them. Now, I don't place the 17-year-old responsibility on a 12-year-old, think I'm going to get better results. It's got to be age appropriate along the way. But I'm going to give them things where they have to work. And are they going to blow it? Will they screw it up? Well, sure they will. Your 16-year-old daughter that just got $300 on the first of the month is going to walk in the house and with a $300 pair of jeans on and go, what do you think? Aren't they great? And you know what your response is, Dad? God, those look unbelievable. Are you serious? Those are unbelievable. They're just cut and shredded and bedazzled and everything. How much did you pay for those? $300. $300, that's a steal. And I wish your mom had a pair of jeans just like that. Those are you look great in those jeans. And they go, you think so? Do you like them? I like them. I love them. What are you talking about? So as she starts to walk off, she goes, oh yeah, Dad, can you spot me $50, now $75, for gas because I don't have any money left over? Nope. And when she says, well, what am I supposed to do? I have no idea. Maybe walk to school in those jeans, See what I'm doing? I haven't met too many. I've been to Ethiopia. I've been to Rwanda, Uganda. I've been to orphanages all over Russia. I've never seen a starving kid. It's just kind of amazing to me. Your child is not going to starve by you not giving them money, but they're going to learn a great lesson because it won't happen the next month. But see how I turned it in instead of yelling and screaming at them? That doesn't do anything. And so now I'm just going, this is your deal. You get to choose. And if you want to do that every time, that's okay. Are you following me with that? It's pretty risky. So I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to get, yeah, I mean, you can give them a lot of stuff. And you have to ask, what would entice your child? What would your child want? What do they desire? If I can give you 5 things that you really want, what would it be? Text them that. And start putting together that list. And it may be, you know what? I'll happily give you those 5 things if you give me these 5 things. Except I'm going to attach some consequences to it. You following me? It's all about giving them responsibility. It's all about them making choices and them the one that's going to be determining whether they live a happy or unhappy life. It's their deal. It's not yours. It was your deal here. It is now their deal here. Okay? The other thing here is that I would tell you that when you deal with the issues, and these issues are here, that this is the structure is about controlling behavior. This is about getting to the heart of the issues. Your kids may be dealing with some issues that they need help with. A child who's adopted, let me use that as an example, moves from concrete thinking to abstract thinking. And it usually happens at 12 or 13 for girls. For men, it's usually about 48, 49, somewhere up there. But the abstract part of it is this, is that we had a young man that lived with us that lost his dad in the World Trade Center 20 years ago. And mom told him that you're now going to have to be, he's 5 years old, you're going to be the man of the house. You're going to have to feed the dog. You're going to have to take care of your little sister who was just 2 years younger. We're going to have to move to another house. Mommy's going to have to get a job. All concrete things. So that's how he deals with, a dad being lost. Daddy's not coming home. Now he turns 12 or 13. He's thinking abstractly. My dad will never see me play basketball. My dad will never meet the girl that I want to marry. My dad will not be at my wedding. My dad will not. See how it's abstract? Child who's adopted. Whatever you say down here, it works. And you get up here, and it now no longer works. Because now they go, somebody abandoned me. Somebody gave me up. Somebody didn't want me. At a time that they're in middle school, where they're feeling that from everybody else as well. And you see where it begins to shift a little bit? So the change is not saying, then let's come up with a whole new set of things to say, because sometimes silence, even a fool appears wise when he keeps his mouth shut. But it may be engaging in such a way that recognizes the loss, that it's okay, yeah, it would be. It's tough knowing you were abandoned. You were abandoned. Now, you would never tell them that early on. It would be tough if you were abandoned. And you were. But I'm so glad you're a part of our family. See how it's identifying the loss, it's affirming the relationship. That must be tough. You know we love you. I don't even know how you would deal with that. Over here. I ask kids all the time, okay, I chair a board called America World Adoption. And so we've done 5,000 adoptions throughout the world in different places, mostly in China, but now we have a couple of houses in Ethiopia where we take girls out of orphanages that have aged out and put them in homes and teach them a trade and hopefully move them on to another part of life. And it's been interesting to me to ask these kids that are in these baby homes that they're lined up and, here's 300 babies in a room and they're all just sitting. I mean, in China, they're just all over the place. And one of the girls named Faye, I said, Faye, let me ask you a question. Do you ever think about when your parents picked you out of that bin? What if they would have just been one over or took one less step and picked that baby instead of you? Where do you think you would be? And she said, I think about that every day. Isn't that amazing? And my point of it is, I don't know where she'd be, but I've got her thinking about it. And so it's just asking questions to get them to talk about that, to affirm that they were abandoned, they were given up. They did get the short end of the stick. This wasn't the best thing in the world. Where's God in all this? I don't know, but I know He was with us when we selected you. See, because you're not going to answer that hard question, where was God? I mean, that's one of the greatest mysteries that people go through every day. Where is God right now in Ukraine? I don't know. But I know this. And so you affirm those things. And so you're dealing with abstract rather than always going back to concrete. Because if you have a child that's thinking abstractly and you try to answer them with concrete answers, what you've just told them is you're not capable of giving them the answers. They're going to find answers somewhere else. Are you following me? People are always concerned about the number of kids that we've had. We've had really 1,300 kids that have been with us, that have been adopted. And we just learned a lot through that process. And you're taking an imperfect situation and wanting it to be better. I've always been somewhat amazed about the excitement that happens around adoptions. And you have to realize that comes out of tragedy. It's like having a party at the foot of the cross. When you think about it, a horrible thing that happened that was the greatest thing that's happened for us all. It's both and. And so there's a part that you go, how do you do both and embrace both? And so the adoption thing becomes an interesting piece. I don't see a lot of kids working through their issues of adoption until they get in their mid-20s. A young lady, if she works through the issues as a teen, when are those issues of adoption going to come up again? When she has a baby. And that's just a part of life. And so part of it is learning how to live with that sense of loss. All that being said, this child may need help getting through that. And when you deal with these issues that we talk about over here, that may be the core issue. That the reason that she's sending nudes and having oral sex with anybody that wants it and doing anything and smoke, it may be because she is wrestling with that sense of rejection that at her core, even though she was told she was wonderfully and uniquely made, that somebody didn't want her and abandoned her. And there's a conflict in that. And so it may be somebody that can help her through that. Now, to find a counselor, is anybody here, you're a counselor, anybody else a counselor? Then you know that counselors, for the most part, are weird. Am I right? I speak at counseling events, and I look at most people and I go, I would never send a kid to be with these people. You got to be kidding me. They're odd. 10% of them are really good. 90%? 10% of them are really good. And so it's looking for that 10%. And if I had an adopted child, what I would want is to find somebody who's been adopted to meet with that child, if that's possible. If I'm dealing with a kid who's hooked on drugs in some form or fashion, I want to find somebody who's been through that. If they're drinking like fish, I want to find somebody that's been an alcoholic to counsel that kid. Somebody who has a baby and given it up, I want that child to meet with somebody who's given that baby up. Are you following me? Because I'm trying to find a connection. Because it's not resolving the loss, it's learning to live with loss. And in time, God can fill that void through different things. My wife will never be fully what she was created to be because of the sexual abuse that's happened in her life. And that's why at age 67, she continues to meet with the counselor that we met with when we were 40 years old, 27 years ago. She now lives in Romania, and Jan's with her every other week, still talking to her. Most 67-year-old people don't continue to work through their issues. They give up a long time ago and drink a lot more wine. And I'm joking. Well, maybe not. But I go, some people give it up. And so my encouragement has always been, you learn to live with loss, and that's okay. It's both and. It's not an either-or kind of thing. Are you following me? Your kids will never be fully what you want them to be. You will never be fully what your kids want you to be. You never will. God designed it that way. That moves them on to somebody that where a man shall leave his mother and a woman leave, and the two shall travel on to somewhere else and begin a new life. That God designed it that way. So the conflict that you have is going to happen. And conflict is a precursor to change. You follow me? Without conflict, there's not going to be any change. So when you have a child up here at age 16 going, I can live on my own. I think I can make it. I don't need you and all that. That's really a good sign because they're becoming independent. What do? No, wait a minute. You can't live on your own. How are you going to pay rent? What about health insurance? How are you going to pay for school? What do? We finally see a child growing up a little bit and we start talking to him with a bunch of information again. I would tell them this, I think that's a great idea. That's wonderful. We can't wait for that to happen, And now they can't use it against me. So it's it's just learning to engage a little bit differently, I think, more than anything. Let me answer some of your questions here. Golly. Can we take a little bit more time? Let me tell you another thing, just real quick, and before I answer questions. You guys need to lighten up a little bit. I tell this to every group. You need to lighten up. We wanted to be on Moody Radio when we first started radio programs, and they, as I said, they have like 100 stations across the country. Is there a Moody Radio here? Do you know, or is it American Family Radio? Does anybody listen to Christian radio here? Bot radio or K-Love? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but Moody wanted us. We wanted to be on. Bless you. We wanted to be on Moody, and so they said, well, let's bring Mark in on a Tuesday morning. We'll let him do a drive time show, and this was a number of years ago, and we'll let him talk about kids from 6 until 7 o'clock, and then from 7 to 8 o'clock, we'll have people ask questions, and he can answer them on air, live, million people listening, and Moody Radio is a very conservative. If they had a sound that would depict Moody Radio, it'd be just very conservative, and so I show up, and I show up in jeans and boots and mustache from wherever, and they weren't used to that, and so we start doing this hour-long thing of talking about kids, just exactly what we're talking about today. And a guy named Mark Elbstrand, who's a wonderful, wonderful guy, is asking me questions, and we're having this discussion, and it's going on. Now we get to 7 o'clock. What you have to know is, and here comes the first question, what you have to know is that the day beforehand, there was a preacher somewhere out west. Of course, everything from here is out west. A preacher out west that was very anti-homosexual and let it be known all the time. Every Sunday morning, he was just anti. And then at the same time, going up to another city, having a homosexual relationship with this guy. And after 3 or 4 years, the guy that was in this other city came out and said, this is what's been going on. Well, this pastor of the church ends up losing his church, almost lost his family, was kicked off the National Association of Evangelicals, which was a board that I served on years ago, and he just kind of lost it all. And so this was years ago. So he ended up going back to people and said, what do I need to do to restore my relationship with the church and people and my family and all this? So a group of counselors got with him and said, this is what you need to do. Over the next 3 or 4 years, he did exactly what he was instructed to do. And so his counselor came out the day beforehand, the day before the 7 o'clock meeting that I'm having, where I'm now going to be answering questions, came out the day before and said that this man is 100% heterosexual. Because there was a question where he landed and all that. Said he's 100% heterosexual. It's on the second page of USA Today, fourth page of the Wall Street Journal. It was on SRN News, on every broadcast from K-Love to Who's Love to His Love to What's Love to it was everywhere that this man, and people knew his name, that he's 100% heterosexual. You following me? Okay, now comes 7 o'clock, and the first question comes in after everybody had already known this other story. On the other side of the glass are all the Moody radio people, fine people. They're the other side of the glass. All of our team from LA is there on the other side that produces the program, and all of our staff that we have in Longview there. So everybody's on the other side, and they're just sitting there with a cup of coffee, unlike in this auditorium, that then just just sitting there sipping on their coffee, and so they're on the other side of the glass, and I can kind of see them, and Mark Elfstram, the guy interviewing me, can see them fully, but there must be 20-some people on the other side. So they come back from a station break, and they say, Mark, we have Stephanie on the line. She's got a question for you. And I said, Stephanie, sweetheart, tell me what your question is. Everybody just kind of looked up, and Stephanie goes, well, Mark, I have a question for you. Are you 100% heterosexual? Everybody just went. They just went like that. The producer, who's a good friend of mine, was on the other side going, oh no, and he starts shaking his head. And I said, well, Stephanie, I don't think so. And when I said that, I mean, the eyes on the other side went like this. And I said, I don't think so. I think I'm 100%, I think I'm 95% heterosexual. I think I'm 3% metrosexual because I wear Tommy Bahama shirts occasionally. And I'm 2% homosexual because I'd kiss Keith Urban if I had the opportunity to. And I thought it was funny. I mean, I just said, where did that come from? And I go, it was kind of like this. It's kind of like, bam, just knocked it out of the park. And I thought, that is unbelievable. And the next thing you heard was, and the weather in Chicago is, and it immediately goes off air. The guy who runs Moody Radio is sitting there knocking on the window going, you can't say that. You can't say that. You're on live radio. You can't say that. The weatherman goes, well, it's a little stormy here, and so he's saying, and so it just got quiet. And I stood up and I just looked at everybody and I said, guys, let me tell you something. If you don't lighten up, you'll never be able to talk about the hard subjects that teens need to talk about. You got to lighten up. So now we're their number 3 program. I was at Duck Dynasty Land speaking at their church, and this elderly lady came up to me afterwards and said, we haven't laughed like that in 45 years. Then another man walked up to me. I did not get his name. He said, Mark, I've found this. You can always throw a bigger brick if it's wrapped in humor. Hear what I'm saying? So my encouragement to you guys is lighten up in your parenting and what you're doing, all that stuff. Lighten up. It's okay. You're going to get to the other side of this thing. It's a temporary thing. It's a chapter in your child's life. You're going to get to the other side. The page will turn. It will be a new chapter, and it will build on what's in the previous chapter. And you'll see that God does cause everything to work for good. So anything horrible and bad and all that. Well, my wife, I'll give you an example. The characteristics that I love about my wife the most are the characteristics that have been developed from the sexual abuse that she experienced for years. So that's when Jesus said, that he'll turn the water into wine. Scripture tells us that God will turn our ashes into beauty, that he'll turn our sadness into joy and our mourning into dancing. There's a promise there, and you know that it's going to stop. And so with that, there's that sense that we can lighten up a little bit. Learn to laugh about things. People ask me all the time, how do you live with 60 high school kids? How have you done that? I go, well, we drink a lot. And I don't say that. But my comment is you learn to laugh about stuff. And just think about whatever would be the worst scenario that you would ever imagine. We've dealt with it and had it. Just think of whatever it is. And I go, what you do is you learn to just know that God's in control and we're going to get to a good spot, even though I don't understand all of it. Okay, I've got to end that story with this, that we were at Leapers Fork, Tennessee, west of Franklin, Tennessee. We were recording at another program, a guy named Michael Card, who wrote the song El Shaddai that Amy Grant came out with like 1 billion years ago. We're recording at his studio, and so we decided to take a break and go eat at this little sandwich shop. And we do, and at that sandwich shop, we're sitting there. It's a little tiny place like this. We're sitting off the corner, and guess who walks in? Keith Urban. And so one of our guys goes, well, Mark, there you go, and so so he's with his wife, Nicole, and so I walk up to him. I just had to take 4 or 5 steps, and I go, hey, Keith, I'm Mark Gregston, and I said 95 and 3% and 2% that I'd kiss you if I had the opportunity. And he just looked at me and goes, well, that ain't going to happen. Anyway, I tell people all the time, you've got to loosen up. You've got to loosen up and learn to roll with it a little bit. Can I answer some questions here? There's a lot, and I know it's right at 2:00, and this is supposed to get over at 6, right? No, the game starts at 6. Is that what it is? Okay. Can I run through these really quick? And this is what I'll do too, is that I'm going to take these and we'll use these. We'll divide them up by 7 or 8 at a time and go a little bit further on the podcast. And y'all can listen on the podcast, and this will be for the next few weeks or something. And could be the beginning of the I must ask Mark a question kind of thing. Somebody said, and I haven't read all these, so pardon me if it says, thanks for your for a teacher, we do you have kids from all cultures and backgrounds in your residential counseling center? It's interesting. Somebody made a comment about that all the kids at Heartlight look pretty white, and I said, well, that's interesting to me, because not only do we have white, but we have Mexican, Canadian, we have Chinese kids, we have Russian kids, Croatia, Siberian. We had one Eskimo that was with us that I thought was kind of unique. I never knew that existed. We've got a Paraguayan that is with us. We have 7 or 8 probably 7 or 8 kids from South America, 2 kids one from Ethiopia that we're financing being there with us. And so, yeah, they come from everywhere. I think people limit race by color. And I go, I've never really seen color, and I I just don't operate that way. I'm one of those Texans that it doesn't matter to me. But I look at our kids and I go, we have a lot of them from a lot of different segments. Interestingly, there aren't a whole lot of kids that we have with us from Japan, because Japan has a strong family system, as does the Hispanic, mostly Mexican culture they take care of their own. And as do the Ethiopians, which is kind of interesting. And so sometimes adoption is against what a lot of the culture wants, and so they want to take care of them there. So that's where we set up things in Ethiopia to do that. But the answer is yes. I don't care about what color anybody is or what background they're from. The hardest kids we've ever dealt with are Russian kids. They're just harder kids, and I'm not so sure why. I'm sure vodka has something to do with it, because that's the way they raise money, and most deaths and everything else is vodka related in some way. Somebody said, how do you balance not asking why or listening to them saying they don't want to talk about it with asking, why don't you want to talk about it? What I've learned when kids say, I don't want to talk about it, it's either they don't know what their feelings are, they don't have the words to express, and sometimes we put limits on words. I tell a kid, you express it any way you want. You just talk to me. It's more important to get the feelings out than it is them using the right words. And so they'll come up. When my mom died, somebody said, well, how do you feel? I don't know. I've never had a mom die before. I'm not so sure I know what that feeling is. My dad's in hospice. He'll die soon, hopefully. It's time. It's time for it to be over with. I'm not so sure what I feel about that. I don't even know the word to put with it. And so it's interesting how kids will use certain words to explain certain things. So you look beyond the words and try to get to the message of things. But when a kid says, I don't know, most of the time they're saying, I don't have the words to explain it. I don't know what those feelings are, especially young men. They have a tougher time coming to their feelings. No surprise, right, women? Or the third thing is they don't feel safe in the environment they're in to talk. And so that's where I need to make sure, what can I control? I can control the environment. I've got to figure out how do I do that? Let me encourage you to go to YouTube and look under Heartlight Stories. It's not a promo for Heartlight, because I try to keep people from coming to Heartlight, but it's probably 60, 70 stories of what we do with kids that live with us, but it's me interviewing them. We strip the audio, put it on a podcast, we strip it and put it on the radio program, but you get to actually see the kids while they talk, and it makes a difference that you're watching them as they share things. But I'm just asking questions more than anything else, and it'll give you some good ideas about how to maybe ask some of those questions. It says, how can single moms get their male sons to listen and respect women with no male model around? You know, which I think being a single mom and a step parent is one of the hardest roles that anybody would be in. And so my encouragement would be, that's why a youth group is important. That's why good, healthy youth leaders are important. That's why participating in sports is important. I mean, those things, you get them around people that they can spend time with other people and be exposed to them. And to those of you who have healthy homes and everything else, may I encourage you to do this. Take a mission project on. Don't just think that you have to go to Mexico or somewhere else to have a mission project. The mission project may be in your backyard. It may be the neighbor across the street. It may be that family that has an autistic child, or that single mom that has an autistic child, that maybe needs somebody to say, you know what? I'm going to commit that I'll be at your house on Tuesday afternoon for the next 5 years to take care of your son. I will commit to whatever it is. That may be the way that you can help that family. You're invited to our house every Thursday night to eat. And we would like to have you over, and that you do that, you engage that way. To the kids that are always bad kids, that you feel like are bad kids, maybe that's your mission field that God has placed in your life for a reason. People send us their bad kids all the time. It's funny to me that kids come and stay with us and learn more about the love of God and the depth of relationships by all these bad kids being together than them being handled the way that they are being handled, which is usually to exclude them from things. So that's where it only gets worse. I hope that helps a little bit. What your youngest points out inconsistencies of your, what if your youngest points out inconsistencies in your parenting of him because it's different from how you parented your older one? I would ask the question when they do that, what is it? Tell me what it is, and come up with a reason. There's a reason why we let this be too much, and we're going to rein back a little bit. Or, you know what? Usually the second child gets to do more things. It's kind of like having that first baby. You bring it home, you make people wash their hands before they touch it. You know, they have to sterilize themselves, and they go through background checks and fingerprints and everything before they come and see your child, and they have to brush their teeth and gargle with Listerine and all that stuff. Time the second baby gets here, you're dragging that thing across the dirt. You don't care anymore. And so the same way, you do all these parenting techniques for the first child, and you can loosen up a little bit because hopefully you've learned that you can let things go, and you've learned some things from it. So one, I'd let them do more. Suggestions, words of wisdom for parents and of adult children who have wandered and left the faith. How do you help them and not hinder them? Quit bugging them all the time. Don't think that you have to keep just going after them and keep telling them about the love of Jesus. They know about the love of Jesus. Every time you bring it up, what you're doing is reminding them of how far they've gotten away. You can be a vessel of love to that child. Every kid that comes to us, for the most part, is going, screw this. I don't want anything to do with God. And I go, that's okay. And we have a Bible study if you want to go to it. We tell them they have to go to church, but we're not ones that are evangelistic in our approach, even though that would be my style. We don't do that. If you just give your life to Christ, everything will be okay. That's not true. Most of them already have. And so the part of it is just loving them and letting them experience what love is, rather than me always tell them about it. Now, here's the change. Our kids hear everything. They can hear everything now. So words are a dime a dozen. Actions are few and far between. And so it's saying, how can I show them those things? For a 16, 17-year-old, how do you set boundaries for video games, for a girl? Well, one, that's where I'm going, require a job. Your child will continue to sleep the needed amount of time that they can sleep. They're going to sleep, say, 8 hours. And so you need to fill the time with other stuff. They do video games because it passes the time. Most kids are bored out of their mind. I know a lot of families that would love to have a child at home playing video games rather than being 6 feet under in a grave somewhere. And so you have to put it in perspective. But the fact that they're there, I would also learn to play video games. I don't do well with some of those games. Whenever you're shooting something, I always shoot my feet off. I do. It's just funny to me that I'm blowing things up I don't want to blow up, and I'm always dying or crashing the helicopter or, ramming something into a building. It's just, but I would learn. And then on top of that, I'd buy a bigger screen TV and install it, saying, to him who much is given, much is required. We're going to allow you an hour a day. In an hour, we turn it off. Okay, somebody else made a comment about the square or the circle that the Disney circle. That's what Kirk Cameron was talking about. I believe that we ought to know everything our kids are doing online when they're down here. But I also know I need to train them up and get to a point where I am transitioning to them the control of their life. If I continue to use either a tracking device or something that's reading all of their text, and I've got a child that's 18, what is that saying to a child? I was in 9th grade, and my mom and dad never listened to my conversation that I had with Jan. Now, at the same time, there's not the influence that used to be there. So this is where you have to use your own judgment and age appropriateness. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying at some point, We have a guy in our staff that's 23 years old, and his mother would call him when he was at college and say, "You're in the parking lot right now. What are you doing? You need to be in bed at 10:30. This kid is dumb as a bucket of rocks. I mean, he is. He came to me, he goes, "How do you write a label?" What do you mean, how do you write a label? Have you gotten any mail in your life? I mean, really, have you ever, somebody send you a thing of mail? I go, "Okay, I need you to sign these letters," because he printed out some letters. He goes, "Well, where do I sign it?" You sign it underneath where it says fondly or sincerely. And so he signed it underneath, but he signed everything over in the corner. After he said, "Well, I've never signed my name before." Okay, I can't help but put that together. If this over here is just to protect my child from the evils of the world, then I've got to tell you, I'm letting this guy go because he can't function in the world. Because at age 23, he doesn't even know how to write a label or sign his name. Or, I mean, if it's protection and we protected him, then they have inhibited him from growing up. That's where there's a difference between all this. Okay? There's other parts of protection. I check where my wife is all the time. I know she's in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now. I know she went to this grocery store in Tulsa. I mean, I'm always checking. That's just a way for me to protect my wife and know where she is. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm not stalking my wife either. See the difference between the two? So I just want to make it clear on that. The video games, I would require other things. Truly, I would require other things that would keep them from having so much time to put into video games. Somebody said this: "Why are homeschoolers 1/3 of your teens?" Okay, we're going to take 10 more minutes and we'll be done, okay? They are because they've been overprotected. And we all found that out, is that we used to homeschool kids with the idea of isolating them. And it's not that. I spent a lot of time in the Amish community. Matter of fact, I'm up there again. I'm at Franconia Mennonite Church in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I love going to that church and love the people that are up there. They're wonderful people. Matter of fact, if y'all watch The Voice, the people who just won, do y'all watch The Voice? Y'all watch that? The people that just won is a girl named Tom. Anyway, they're doing a couple of events for us. They're Mennonite kids, which I didn't know. So I told them I'd be baptized as a Mennonite if they would come and do something for us. So they are. Anyway, I've been around a lot of the isolated groups, and I think we found out a long time ago that kids need to have social interaction, especially now. And so I'm all for homeschooling. We homeschool the kids that live with us, but I do believe in social interaction. And that's where the Supreme Court even ruled on allowing kids that if you pay property tax and you can go to public school and participate in sports. They realize that as well, that there needs to be social interaction. How do you keep the door open for honest conversation? I am totally honest with kids. If I'm thinking it, it's on the table. Everything's on the table. I believe if their parents have said something to me and they're hiding it from them, I go, I'm not hiding anything, it's on the table. My honesty creates a world of honesty, and that's what I long for. It says we have a biological daughter that was adopted, that's 11, and an adopted son who is 8. He was adopted at birth. As your experience with adopted boys, what advice would you give us to this teaching stage of him becoming a teenager? Okay, every adopted kid, just where you know, is going to be thwarted some way in their development. If it would have been better for them to have a home to be with you from the very beginning than the way that it worked out. And the tendency is, if this is a child that has been born in the U.S. and is adopted, the chances are 40% chance that they're going to carry on some of the impulsivity or the ADD, ADHD, the bipolar will be carried on by them as well. 40% chance. That's pretty high, isn't it? And so what you may be doing is a wiring. You may be dealing with a wiring structure. And while most people think, well, I'll just have nurture overcome nature, It doesn't always work that way. As your child perceives things, they perceive it through a grid of rejection for the most part. And so they will always when they hear correction, what do they hear? See, I am bad. I'm worthy to be given up. And so it's just being creative enough to figure out how do I affirm them in the midst of correcting them. But that's why you get the response that you do. And you've got to have 3 positive comments for every negative comment. So if you spend most of your time always correcting them, telling them where they're wrong and how they need to do things better, and you don't counteract that with positive comments, then you're pushing your child further away from you, not closer to you. So they will go to a place, they will find rest somewhere with somebody that can accept them for who they are, that has very little expectations, or may even escape from life by video games, smoking pot all the time, being drunk. Most of that has to do with the connection that they're making with somebody else that'll accept them. Okay, 2 more questions and we'll call it quits, okay? What do you think of young adults living at home if they're not ready to move out? Late bloomers due to a tough life. I think it's wonderful. Just spend your time waiting for them to go. If you've got when I say that somebody needs to leave at 18, that's in normal circumstances because a lot of people do. But if they've been late bloomers in some way, then you give them the time. But it's with the idea that you're going to be out on your own sometime, so start moving toward that. I would have them carry a job somewhere, and I'd have them carry a job so that they can learn to engage with other people, so they may have somebody else they want to move in with at some time. Are you following me? So no, I don't think you kick them out all at once. Since technology is a part of our life now, with COVID, it became much more of a part of life, of their life. All friends, all talking, all everything. What do you recommend is too much? And back away from all online with wisdom, school, friends. Of course, everybody's watching more movies than they ever have. Because they have more time where they're sitting around watching it. And at this age, they would get consumed just like you would. You know, they're looking at something. Curiosity has an amazing way of driving kids to look at other things. Experimentation, seeing things, learning things that they haven't learned before. They become know-it-alls. But at some point, to think that a child that we've raised and have babysit with, that we're babysitting them with iPads, that they're immediately going to give it up and become responsible. You take that stuff away, what are you going to replace it with? That'd be my question. What do you replace it with? You know, my grandson has a little bit of a speech impediment, and it's because he doesn't interact enough. So my son asked the question, well, what are we supposed to do with that? I go, take away the iPad. Just take it away. Get him involved in sports, have him interact with other people, and you'll see he'll get through a lot of this. And he is, and he doesn't talk with this little baby lisp that he has, and he's getting through it. Now, the other part of it, too, when they get up here, I'm going to start requiring more of them rather than doing more for them. And by doing that, it's filling their time. So I want them to be involved in other things so that it fills them time and gets them off of playing all these games all the time. Are you following me on that? Okay. Let me show you a couple other things, and we'll be done. It's hard that we've gone through all this. The podcast that you listen to, it's just called Parenting Today's Teens. This is free stuff. And I would tell you, please take advantage of that podcast. It's free. You get to listen to it on demand whenever you want to. The other thing is the YouTube channel that's called Heartlight Stories. That's free. It'll give you great insight into kids that are just like yours. The other thing is the app where you can also get articles. And there's hundreds of articles. And all the programs, everything we've done is on this app. So take advantage of it. You can follow us on Facebook. We give away a lot of stuff on that. There's a lot of curriculum series that you can get. Most of the curriculum series that we have for small groups, there's one for grandparenting, one for high school, and one for middle school parents. You don't have to buy it. We'll either give it to you or give it to the church and let them do it or something. But we'll provide those things for you. You don't need to go someplace else to get it. Of course, you can listen on radio all the time. And the other thing I would tell you is this, that if you're at a point that your kids are spinning out of control and you don't know what to do, and it is getting to the point where you go, if we continue on this, we're not going to be in a good spot in a few months, then you need to come to a family in crisis conference. And those are conferences we have at Heartlight. Cost $500, I think, for a couple. But it's 3 days of us spending time with our counselors. It's limited to 40 people. It's just helping people through things and to come up with a plan about how you're going to engage differently. 95% of those people never send their child to another program anywhere. The other thing I would tell you this, take advantage and don't hesitate to spend a little bit of money, even if you can't afford to do some things with your kids that maybe you need to do, that you need to spend some time. And the reason I say that, Heartlight is very expensive. We charge $10 an hour. Now you compute how many hours there are in 11 months, and you'll see how it gets up there. You can spend a lot less money by doing things with your kids, not making it all spiritual, because you are spiritual in that process. By doing things and building that relationship, that becomes the key element of all of this. So that's what I hope that you hear out of everything we're talking about, is relationship is key, and that's what you've got to focus on. Anyway, guys, thank you for letting me come and be a part. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
There were several things I thought going into this, and I'm standing here to confirm they're true. After spending some time on the phone with Mark, I knew we would enjoy this, and I knew it'd be fantastic. And again, to all those listening online, I'm sure you're going to agree. One of the things that I appreciate, you can tell when somebody is speaking out of a true desire and heart for something, and just out of experience, not just, hey, I went and took a course, now I'm the expert, but just having done it and lived it for a long, long time and loving kids. And I know if you're sitting here, this is the other conclusion I came to even before this all happened. I said, I think I'm going to leave going, there's a whole lot more I want to know and a whole lot more questions I want to ask. And we're going to figure out ways to do that. Thank you for sharing the resources you just shared. I was going to share some of that at the end here. And we'll continue to follow up, as a church to go, okay, how can we really change our own thinking? Because I know for a lot of this, just in discussing with some of you at lunch, it's like, wow, this is just really making me rethink. I was talking to a couple of guys that our kids are, gone, and we're talking about being grandparents, and we're talking about how we can be a better help in the church. But a lot of that is still challenging our own thinking. And I really appreciated those comments. I know Rick's back there shaking his head. We were both talking about that going, wow, that, I know we can't go back, but that's, there's a lot we still can do in giving in the church, and we have a lot of kids in this church. So it's been a wonderful time together, Mark. Far better than what we expected, and we expected a lot, to be really honest. So I want you to know that. But thank you, and I know you will be a friend to church, and hopefully we'll have you back in the future. And again, one more plug: if you have a spare ticket for tonight, just let me know and I'll get it tomorrow. No, I'm just messing with you. How about we just close out with a short word of prayer, and then Mark will be around for a little while at least to chat and meet some of you. And I would say, don't barrage him with 50 questions. I do appreciate that he's going to take some of those questions and hopefully turn those into some podcast things, and maybe get some more of us listening on a regular basis. So let's close out with a short prayer. God, it's been a great day. You're an amazing, loving God, and you demonstrate how to love in ways that we're still learning. And God, will learn, and as Mark was sharing, we'll learn how we love more and more as we grow, not just as disciples, but as parents, as friends, as leaders. Ultimately, God, that's what we're looking to do, is to mature and to be who we need to be to each other, to our families, to our kids. Thank you for people like Mark who will come and share their heart, their successes, their failures, their experiences, their knowledge, their wisdom. and for the ministry of how they have loved kids that, well, let's be honest, a lot of us wouldn't want to love and would just write off. Thank you, God. Give us that heart of Jesus to love those who are hurting and who are weak and who just need help. It's been a great day. God, I pray that you'll bless everyone as we think about the things that we've heard, as we digest them, that it will translate into people that are different. We love you so much. We thank you. In Jesus we pray. Amen. Thank you, guys. Thanks for joining us online.